across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you, and how are you doing today? A little bit bleary-eyed, possibly. Did you stay up and watch it? It was gripping, wasn't it? There we are. We are through. And, well, this is where it gets real, doesn't it? Are we going to make it all the way to the finals? I know nothing about football. What I do know is it does feel like there's a glimmer of hope. Shh, say it quietly. In fact, walking to the station today, I walked past a number of red London buses, which all had Bellingham as their destination. I was like, well, that's great. Don't know where that is. Which zone is that? How am I going to get there? But there you go. It's nice. It's paying tributes to what has been so far a pretty remarkable performance by England. But anyway, putting football to one side, developments have now happened following that brutal, terrifying murder of Ann Widdecombe in her own home in Hayter, in Dartmoor. A man has been arrested, a 28-year-old, in South Yorkshire. Now, when we look at the timescales, what we know so far, where messages have been released to the press from a producer, a booker at Channel 5, who had been speaking to Anne all the way through until about 12:15, the afternoon of her death. And she had, in her normal, chatty, very human way, was joking with the producer about age and, yes, I'm going to be there and don't worry. And I imagine her, you know, thinking, right, got half an hour before I have to go log into Zoom and do my appearance, so I'm going to go downstairs, put the kettle on, the doorbell goes, and that's the half an hour we don't know what happened. That's the half an hour where she never logged in to the Zoom call. And 24 hours later, she was found dreadfully beaten up, serious injuries, bleeding out. And so we have big questions. There was speculation. There's been a lot of speculation, and speculation isn't always good. But Nigel Farage has said, isn't it curious, the idea that someone might drive all the way to the West Country, particularly if they had originated from South Yorkshire, park on someone's drive, middle of the day, and then go again? If that's a burglary gone wrong, we're going to have to wait. We know that the police are going to be giving a statement at around 10:45, is my understanding. These things tend to lag a little bit, but we'll keep you posted. Of course, any updates, you will be the first to know. Anyway, I am joined wonderfully, can I say, by former Prime Minister. What an honour, Liz Truss. Liz, I'd love to be sitting here talking to you about happy things. I'd love to be talking about our success in the football. I'd love to be talking about how right-wing politics is going to get its act together and we're going to win the fight. And then this has happened. And it's dominating the headlines, certainly dominating our run order. And words are beginning to fail me now. Let's start off talking about Anne, the person, because I'm assuming, as you know, she was a former Conservative before she moved over to Reform UK, and my old party, the Brexit Party, that you must have known Anne fairly well.
Yes, and I met her, I think, first properly in about 2007. We met at a garden party. You know, she was great fun. And, you know, I've known her over the years through my time in politics. And most recently, I had her on my show, the Liz Truss Show, only a few months ago. And she was talking about policing and justice issues on my show. And I saw her at dinner recently. She was always around. She was always great fun, always had lots of insights into politics. And it's just, it's awful. What is it? It's just absolutely awful what happened to her.
I think the thing that makes this ghoulish to me is 78-year-old woman living by herself in the West Country. She wasn't massively remote. You can see from the aerial footage she's in a hamlet, in a village. There are other people who live nearby. But when you're in the public eye and you go to your private address, That is your safety. You know, getting public transport or, you know, being surrounded by crowds if you're at an event, even going up to TV studios, that's very different. But when you go and retreat to your personal address, that's your sanctuary. And the idea that someone has gone directly to her home address and that has been the site of her slaughter really sends chills down my spine.
But she clearly felt so safe there. I mean, she's talked about how she would walk out on Dartmoor. You know, she loved the isolation of the location, the bleakness of it. She felt safe. She had her name on her gatepost at her house. And, you know, that's just been... that vision has been shattered by what's happened.
And it's sending shockwaves, I think, throughout, especially the right wing of politics. There's been an exclusive in the Mail today that Reform are looking into providing 24/7 security for their MPs. As a former Prime Minister, you have security. But before that, when you were an MP, did you feel at risk?
Yes,
sort of got a lot
I
worse.
did.
Talk to me about your experiences.
Yes, I did. And the particular moment when... the most scary moment was in 2017 when you had the Westminster attack. And I just remember being in Parliament and somebody shouting, "Run, you've got to run." And it was so frightening. And if you remember, it was Michael Fallon's security protection officer who shot the assailant. But, you know, just that fear for your life. And again, when we heard about the murder of Joe Cox, that was before actually the Westminster attempted attack. And then David Amos, you know, you do really fear. And also your family fears what might happen to you. I remember, you know, my daughters were shocked when they heard about what happened to Joe Cox. So, yes, it is scary.
And, I mean, I was using a phrase yesterday, a phrase that I've relatively newly learnt, which is stochastic terrorism, which is this idea of creating existential danger. It's hard, isn't it?
It is. It's really hard. It is.
I didn't sleep last night. No, I watched
really
football,
hard,
and this is really on my mind.
You know, when you... I think the Ann Widdecombe murder, it is really hard because this is somebody, she's not a sitting MP.
No.
You know, she is a 78-year-old woman, and to see the way that she's been brutally attacked is really, really difficult.
It is so hard. And I feel like they keep creating this environment where they want to see people like us dead and attacked. We don't know if this was politically motivated, but they keep doing this. And when I say they, let's name who they are, because the words about calling the right wing fascistic, Nazis, far-right thugs, dangerous, divisive, they have to be stopped, have come out of the Prime Minister's mouth. And when I look at the reactions of people on that grotesque platform, Blue Sky, and they are... thread after thread, message after message, the language is so violent. And they keep pretending that we are the dangerous ones. And what have we seen? Assassination attempts against Donald Trump, attacks on Nigel Farage, the death of Charlie Kirk. We don't know about Ann Widdecombe, but massive question marks about this. And I don't know what we're supposed to do. How much further can...
This is a deliberate strategy by the far left to dehumanise people. Yeah. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to dehumanise politicians, activists, voices on the right, and say they're illegitimate. And it's part of a campaign that includes lawfare, it includes debanking. It's saying you don't really have the right to express your views, you don't have the right to live a normal life, you don't even have the right to exist. Yeah. That's how frightening this is. Yeah. And, you know, we cannot let them win. We cannot let these people win because they are...
What can we do? Because this is the thing. It's not just we could... If we had a...
Well, I think what needs to happen is the wider British public need to wake up to this and not buy into this narrative that these people aren't human. Yeah. That's the important point that, you know... and the value system in this country has been corrupted, essentially. You know, going back to the Henry Novak case, we saw this idea that the accusation of racism was more powerful than the fact that a man had been stabbed and was dying. And that is a perversion of what morality should be about. And this is what we're seeing. This is an attempt to dehumanise people, to say they're racist, they're fascist, therefore they don't matter, therefore their lives don't matter. And that's what has to be countered. And I think that the biggest thing that has to change is that people who are on our side need to understand how serious that threat is.
They do.
I don't think people understand how serious the threat is, and this is why, we are ending up in the situation we're in.
And it's marked to me that when we talk about our colleagues on the left wing of politics, we talk about their dreadful policies. We talk about them, I will criticise Sir Keir Starmer. I'll say he's cruel. I will say, again, his rhetoric.
I don't think we have to worry about him much more after Sunday.
That's true, he's gone. But I would...
Could be quite ironic, couldn't it, that he wins, that England might win the World Cup and then Keir Starmer...
Double celebration, eh?
Oh, I know.
On the right, we don't do to them what they do to us. And we are not asking enough questions. We're not asking enough questions about, say, the Socialist Workers' Party, who appear out of nowhere at every protest with ready-made placards saying things like "stamp on the neck of fascists." And when they say that, they mean you, they mean me, they mean Ann Widdecombe, they mean Nigel Farage. And that is very violent language. And we had a situation after Southport where people like Lucy Connolly, who isn't a known person, was put in prison for a post that was up for 2 hours saying, burn down the hotels for all that I care. And they said, well, look, that could lead people to go burn down hotels. You're in prison for 31 months. While people like Sir Keir Starmer himself are saying about people like us, they need to be stopped. They are dangerous. They are divisive. They are far right. They are extremists. They are the politics of hate.
See, but people on the right are, they believe in rational argument and debate, and they think, or they have thought, that the left is acting in good faith. They're not acting in good faith. They are deliberately trying to undermine the humanity of people on the right. So you cannot fight them in the same way that we used to fight them. No. That's the message. You can't legitimise what they say about us. And I think too many people on the right have sought to apologise or, move towards the left position. We've seen this on everything from transgender to Black Lives Matter. You had Conservative ministers kneeling for Black Lives Matter. You are appeasing people who are trying to dehumanise you. You can't do that. You have to call it out. No, you have to call it out.
And so few people do. What do you make, by the way, of what's going on in Clacton? Because there are a lot. I feel like there's a cosy cartel in the establishment who's sitting feeling very proud of themselves right now, going, ha, 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 count bin face. Oh, look, let's take selfies. Let's write a letter to the Speaker saying when he gets elected, can he wear his bin in Parliament? And think it's also jolly and fun because they think they are humiliating Nigel Farage. And there's nothing they like more than making it personal, making someone humiliated because they're spiteful. And yet, what I see in all of that is an establishment laughing at the people. Whether Nigel was right or wrong to call that by-election ahead of the conclusion of the watchdog is, I suppose, anyone's...
I prefer to refer to them as the kangaroo court, the Parliamentary Standards Committee. I mean, we saw them. Yeah. We saw what they did with Boris Johnson. This is not a neutral group of impartial observers. It's a kangaroo court.
And they feel like they've won, don't they? Because at first they were like, ha-ha, we're going to get him. We're going to force a by-election in Clacton. He said, right, if this is going to be a fait accompli. You're going to make me face the people of Clacton. I'll do it. Let's do that fight. And they said, no, not doing it. We don't believe in your by-election, despite the fact that it's their favourite tool to use to switch leaders of the Labour Party and Prime Minister, etc. They'll cancel elections.
It is extraordinary how the by-election has become the thing in British politics now. To me, it shows we've got a broken system.
So broken.
That people are not getting what they want. So they keep trying to find new ways of circumventing a broken system, but ultimately we're going to have to fix the system. It is unaccountable. Politicians aren't actually in charge The unelected bureaucrats are in charge. That's who Tony Blair put in charge. Nothing will change until we fix the system. But all of these by-elections, all of the noise that we see in politics is a result of a deeply broken system.
And
the transmission mechanism doesn't work anymore. People vote for things. They vote for less immigration. They vote for lower taxes. They don't vote for DEI and net zero, but that's what they get.
Yeah. And if they push back and if the democracy is starting to work for them, democracy has to be changed. We have to change the plebiscite. We have to cancel elections. We have to give votes to 16-year-olds. We've got to gerrymander constituencies. We've got to move to proportional representation. We've got to boycott elections. Because the big worry, it seems to be, from the political establishment is democracy. They need to somehow circumvent it. And when I look at the optics of the establishment, all the other parties being represented by trash, I actually think in some respects it's quite perfect. And I think, you know, hopefully Nigel Farage will take the trash out in Clacton.
This is one of the reasons that we are having the first ever British CPAC this Thursday in London. People can still get their tickets, gb.cpac.org, is to bring together people who are just fed up with this failing establishment in Britain and want to take it on and want things to really change. And it's not just people in the political parties, and we've got people speaking from Reform. Nigel Farage is speaking. We've also got people from the Conservative Party. But we've got people from the free speech movement, people who are Bitcoiners, people who are concerned about immigration. We've got our allies from Europe and America coming because people realise there's something seriously wrong with our country now. And it's not enough just to vote the right way in an election. Yeah. That has not worked. We need something that's bigger than that. We need a movement that's actually going to take this orthodoxy on, because these people are still in power. They are the establishment.
That's the interesting thing. The left have been so good at organising themselves at a supranational level. Frankly, they're better at organising themselves at a domestic level. We saw in Makerfield, everybody just vote for Burnham. The left are much more able to say, right, we will strategically vote to stop the right. And the right is able to say, well, our ideology is all shared. Let's help each other out.
But the left have been infiltrating our institutions for years. For years and years and years. If you look at DEI and the police and how that arose, that was there even before the Macpherson inquiry. You had people for pushing for that agenda, you know, the institutional racism agenda, the DEI agenda, before Macpherson. And they used that report as an opportunity to push their agenda. And the right were nowhere.
Yeah.
They weren't trying to influence the police. They weren't trying to infiltrate the civil service. Some of them might have been making money in the city. Others might have been running their own business. But the left have been busy for 50 years. And I think a whole clear-out is needed.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. Talk to us a bit more about CPAC. Give us some more of the sort of standout names who, if people are going to go get their tickets, who they could get to. People they might not know, but people who
Well,
are
first
really
of all, Alex Phillips is going to be there.
Obviously,
she is going to be on stage talking about how the left have taken over British institutions and how we can fight that. She's going to be live broadcasting from CPAC as well. So we've got Nigel Farage is going to be speaking. We've got lots of people from Reform, including Sarah Pocham. We've got the London Mayor candidate, Layla Cunningham. We've got some Conservative figures like Jacob Rees-Mogg is going to be talking about the deep state. We have also Andrew Griffiths going to be talking about business. We've got Ian Duncan-Smith talking about his experience of dealing with the Brussels bureaucracy. We've also got our European allies. So we've got Mateusz Morawiecki, who's head of the ECR in Brussels, former Polish Prime Minister. We've got the former Polish President. They are fighting the same problems in the EU.
And some Australian friends.
We've got our Australian friends. We've got Pauline Henson, who you can watch on my podcast. She just appeared this week on the Liz Truss show.
I can't wait to meet her.
She is the leader of the One Nation Party, which is currently ahead in the polls in Australia. She famously wore a burqa in the Australian Parliament to protest. I do not know what she will be wearing for CPAC. And we've got guests from America like Jack Posobiec, who is a major podcaster. We've also got lots of people from British business and British free speech campaigners like Lucy Connolly. So we've got 2.5 days of bringing together everybody who wants to see the establishment in this country taken down.
It's amazing.
And replaced with people who are actually going to do what the British public want.
I think it's amazing, and it's the very first one, and to have such a brilliant lineup for the inaugural CPAC GB is
I hope
real
there's no one I've
testament.
missed off, because I don't want any... we've got lots of brilliant independent broadcasters as well, like Dan Wood and Mike Graham, fantastic people too. So.
It's going to be a good old get-together, good old knees up, but at a time when we desperately do need to get together. Let's take a short break now. We're back after this.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just... There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Well, let's talk now, still with the brilliant Liz Truss. Let's talk now about Andy Burnham, because, you know, we're talking about how the establishment, the left establishment, just don't give a fig about democracy. They will say, well, he ran a by-election in Makerfield. It's the equivalent of 0.03% of the population having voted for him. 20,000 votes of allegedly 70 million in our population. You'd need, I keep saying, you need the James Webb telescope to see that micro dot of democracy. But the point is, ever since Makerfield, we've not heard from him. He's done only one interview. All he's written about so far is foreign policy, which was to his Labour backbenchers, where he immediately turned around and said, well, we should have come down on Israel like a ton of bricks after October the 7th, you know, with them sort of, you know, dismembering and murdering their own people. It's just utterly balmy stuff. And he's about to be auto-anointed as the Prime Minister. And the typical UK, people are just like, oh, yeah. That's what we do. I mean, look, we can talk about the change of leadership in the Conservative Party, but you all fought leadership elections. We knew exactly what Liz Truss was all about.
That's not entirely true, is it? Because Theresa May, I suppose there was a part leadership election, but it wasn't. When Rishi Sunak was installed after I was deposed, there was no... I mean, he lost the leadership election and then he was installed. I think what this is showing, and what it's going to show, and Burnham is going to be just as unpopular as Keir Starmer within 6 months, is that we've got a broken system in Britain. I think parties should, we have a parliamentary system. They can change Prime Minister. I think it's stupid to do so when the problem isn't just the Prime Minister in Keir Starmer's case. The problem is Labour said the Conservative Party was doing austerity, that they hadn't spent enough money, and they've got into government, they've realised there is no money in the coffers, that actually the Conservative Party spent too much, taxed too much, did all this stuff like net zero and DEI, and the thing doesn't work. I mean, that's Labour's problem, is they've got no strategy, and they're like a bad team changing the football manager, because they think they're trying to find a way out of their fundamental problem, which is there is no good way of governing Britain in a socialist.
Right.
So there's no good socialism, and Tony Blair got away with it because in 1997 they had huge coffers of money that had been left by the Tories, and so they were able to spend the money. He was able to do all of his gerrymandering of Britain's constitution, which ended up with all these unelected judges and unelected bureaucrats in charge. Now, things really don't work. They've ground to a halt. And Labour don't really want to admit that. So the Burnham thing, to me, is just window dressing. It's just a slightly more attractive, slightly more charismatic politician and hoping that will work.
But, I fear that he is more plastic than Starmer, more likely to be pushed about by the radical left. But also the thing that's alarming me the most, that we're just sort of like, what we do know about Burnhamism and his intentions, is this devolution stuff. This is what we've got to do. We've got to get, democracy closer to the people. They've got to have more say in what matters. Like, F off. You don't like democracy. You don't want people to have a say. To me, this sort of hyper-devolution is bureaucratisation. It's zoning people for greater control. It's very communist, I think. And when you look at the economies of Wales and Scotland, I think both are something like £26 billion in deficit every year. But even with the sort of very generous ratios from the Barnett formula, 1 in 4 jobs in Wales is working for the government. And under Burnhamism, where he wants to renationalise utilities, where he wants the government, to state fund factories, wants to create even more pen pushers and apparatchiks working for the state, we're all going to be Winston Smith. There will be no jobs other than for something the government runs.
Smith, where we were already living in 1984. People are being put in jail for posting on X. We are in a bad situation already. The Treasury will not allow Burnham to do devolution.
Really?
I can tell you that. We are one of the most centralised countries in the world in terms of the way we are run. It is run by the Treasury. They are not going to allow Burnham to do what he's suggesting. I don't believe this industry nationalisation will happen because the country's run out of money.
How can you afford
The gilt rates are higher than when I was in office, I always point out. So I think a lot of this is window dressing, and when it comes down to it, the fundamental policies will not really change because they're in a hole. They're in a hole. They're already saying they're going to need to raise taxes. All we know that higher tax is going to drive away more businesses, more millionaires are going to leave Britain, less money will come into the coffers, and ultimately we're going to have a financial crisis, and that's what Burnham is going to be facing. So I would just take all this with a pinch of salt. How close do you think we are
to that? I was watching Liam Halligan talking the other day. He's a brilliant economist. And he was saying, look, we're too big to bail out, and people don't realise how close to bankruptcy we actually are, that we're actually right now on the precipice.
We are.
And instead, everyone's laughing about a man dressed as a goddamn garbage can, when actually we're in terrible dire straits.
We are in terrible straits. The Bank of England, the governor of the Bank of England is an ally of the Labour Party. He's advocated for rejoining the EU. He's advocated for net zero. He's advocated for DEI. He's totally on their page. He is doing what he can, essentially printing money to keep the whole thing afloat. But yes, it could collapse. And Britain hasn't had a surplus for 25 years. We've been running a deficit for 25 years. The country is an absolute economic mess. Net zero has killed off our manufacturing industry. We've got the financial services industry is the only thing that's doing OK. but it's still under massive pressure and massive competition.
I mean, they will want to regulate that hard as well. Because
they're not going to be able to do very much. And we saw Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves didn't really have much room for manoeuvre, which is why they ended up doing things like cutting the winter fuel allowance for pensioners, because there was no money in the till. And when Andy Burnham gets into number 10, he is going to realise just how bad it is.
I've got a lot of listeners and viewers who want to ask some questions, and wonderful Ratty has thankfully put them in my little presenter dustbin over here. Alex, can you ask Liz, given the state removed 70% of Nigel Farage's security funding, do you think they were knowingly putting him in danger? Asks Chris in Newbury.
I mean, I think that we need to protect all of our MPs a lot better, and clearly Nigel Farage is under particular threat, and more needs to be done. That's very clear.
Do you think there is this sense that there is a deep state who are sort of from behind the scenes?
Well, what I know from my time in government is there are many civil servants who are ideologically motivated, and that can't be denied. They believe in net zero fanaticism, or they believe in transgender ideology. At the Foreign Office, there are many officials who are pro-China, who are anti-Israel. This is just where we are with the British state. I mean, we've seen this in the Home Office, that there has been Islamist infiltration into the Home Office. So, yes, we do have a problem with the state. And this is what political leaders need to understand. There needs to be a plan about how you actually change that. Otherwise, a new Prime Minister could get into office and nothing will change. This is my prediction about Andy Burnham, why nothing will change, because ultimately the people with their hands on the levers have a particular worldview, and it's not our worldview, Alex.
Do you think he's sort of been their pick because he's just prettier than Starmer, and nicer? So they just think it's sort of like a soporific effect. He's sort of more charming, so it just distracts people for a while. They'll feel a bit more comfortable.
It's absolutely that. These people are desperate. They thought they'd ridden to a massive majority. Keir Starmer was the most unpopular Prime Minister in British history. They can't really understand why, because he agrees. Labour activists believe in all this human rights stuff. They believe in open borders. They can't understand why it's so unpopular. So they're rolling the dice, trying to find somebody who's more charismatic, more attractive, hoping that he can sell the message better. It's not going to work.
Jason in Keswick says, great to hear Liz talk, and it's terrifying to see how bad things are on the left with the powers that control the broken system. Have you spoken to Kemi about the situation with the establishment since Kemi has been leader? Do you ever speak to Kemi?
I've sort of maybe seen her once or something like that. I mean, my issue with, and this is really both the Conservative and the Reform Party, is I don't think either party are being radical enough on how the state needs to be changed. I think we need an entirely new senior civil service to run Britain. And I don't think the Conservatives are there yet. They're still defending the Bank of England. They're still defending the Office of Budget Responsibility. These are two of the institutions that have been completely captured.
Do you think Kemi's making the right decisions at the moment with the way she talks about reform, with joining the boycott or perhaps even leading that boycott of the by-election in Clacton? Is this the right approach?
Well, I think there is a danger for the Conservatives of the uni-party accusation. That's the danger. And when we were in office, we did not dismantle the Blairite state. That was our big failing. Not getting rid of the Human Rights Act, the Climate Change Act, the Constitutional Reform Act. That's what we should have done. And Kemi needs to indicate a massive break from the past. So far, she said, we made mistakes on immigration, but it's not enough. You've got to take down the whole Blairite state.
She's sort of saying as well, we're not going to have candidates who will stand for election for us if they want to stay in the ECHR, if they want to stick with net zero. We're going to clean the decks. But my concern with all of this is actually if you were given blank manifestos right now from Reform and the Conservative Party, it'd be hard to know whose was whose in many respects. And so it does seem to me it's a turf war, but it's not a battle of ideas on the right. When if you added up the percentages who say they would vote Conservative and say they'd vote Reform, we could sock it to the left.
But this is another, I'm going to give another plug for CPAC.
Hey.
But the point about what needs to happen is all of the left need to be taken on. And it's not just about the Climate Change Act or the Equality Act. Both of those need to be repealed. But it's also all the power that was given to the judiciary. You know, the creation of the Supreme Court. It's the power that was given to the Bank of England and the Office of Budget Responsibility. All of this power needs to be taken back in order for the right to be able to succeed. And that's something both Reform and the Conservatives need to acknowledge. And these are the types of ideas we'll be talking about. The right needs a central idea to get behind about what our vision is for the future of Britain. And I don't feel that's fully on the table yet. And I want to bring together the people with the ideas about that, whether it's free speech legislation, whether it's, you know, what you do on migration. People want boldness. People are so fed up with the state of this country. They want a complete overhaul.
And Merv has asked, my lovely Merv, for those of us who can't go to CPAC, will there be footage? Can he watch it?
Well, I think there'll be a lot of coverage on talktV. Is that
That's
fair,
true.
Alex
Actually,
Phillips?
Merv, I can tell you that my shows on the Friday, Saturday and Sunday will all be live from CPAC. Mark Dolan will be sitting here and we'll be co-presenting, so I'll be on the ground speaking to as many people as possible. So there you are. You can watch as much live. But is there going to be like a YouTube live stream, anything like that?
There will be coverage. But if people want to see these amazing speakers in the flesh, they have to come.
Oh. Right, and Russell Devon says, great interview with Liz, always fascinating to listen to. God bless Anne, a grievous loss to us all. Bob says, I was a bond trade. I always tell friends that if Liz's budget was 1 week earlier or later, she would still be Prime Minister and she would have started growth. Have her explain why, says Bob.
Well, what happened was the day before the budget, the Bank of England announced the sale of £80 billion worth of government gilts. They'd previously been printing money, doing quantitative easing. They started quantitative tightening the day before. This was a deliberate attempt to undermine the government. And then when that exposed the failures of the Bank of England to properly regulate the pensions market, the LDI crisis, there was a run in the markets, and the Bank of England pointed the finger at us. So
deliberate
essentially, it's a deliberate stitch-up. And I only really fully understood this afterwards. I was blindsided by it. The Bank of England didn't tell me what they were doing, which shows you that the system is fundamentally broken when the Prime Minister doesn't know what is happening. But you know, maybe this is just my post facto rationalisation, but I think this needed to happen to show people what is wrong.
Yeah.
Because if the budget had held, you know, we would have had lower corporation tax, lower welfare spending, you know, the VA duty-free would be restored in London. You know, the economy would be in a much better position now. We've had the counterfactual of putting up taxes. What's happened? The debt's gone up. Why has the debt gone up? Because all of the businesses have left Britain. They've closed down. So we've actually got higher debt with, you know, what the blob wanted rather than my proposals.
Art Laffer, he'd be a good person to get along, wouldn't he?
Art Laffer, you know, Art Laffer is a supporter of what we sought to do in the mini budget. But the big learning from me is that we don't just have people on the left that are misguided. We have people on the left who are out there to sabotage what we are trying to do. Our government, our state, is run by people who are ideologically opposed to what we are trying to do. So the biggest problem is not what the policies should be. The biggest problem is how on earth do you get those policies done when you've got people who are allegedly working for you that are deliberately undermining you. That's what people have to understand.
We live in very complex and quite harrowing times. Liz, thank you so much.
Great pleasure.
So good to see you.
Good to see you.
Now we're going to be taking a short break. Allegedly, after the break, we're either going to do one of two things. Bear with us, because sometimes with live broadcasting, things go slightly awry. But in theory, we're going to be joined by Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor. We're also waiting for a police press conference about developments in the murder case of Ann Widdecombe. But needless to say, we are going to be joined by Paul Cox. That is one thing that I can guarantee. Right, we're back after this.
the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello. Sorry, I was munching on a bit of breakfast there, and I seem to have slid off the screen to the right. There I am. Don't know what's going on. All over the place today. Paul, hello.
Hello.
Hi. How you doing?
Yeah, just watching from the entertainment and hospitality suite that we have outside the studio. You and Liz with... it was great. It was a great bit of broadcasting, very moving at the beginning of the show.
Liz is one of the toughest people, one of the most sound, sensible, strong, mischievous, tough people that I've ever met. And to look across this desk at her, tears in her eyes, I was like... Because I've been, you know, I've had to do 3 hours of this yesterday, 3 hours of it the day before. It's beginning to take its toll. But it is striking, isn't it, how, you know, for you guys listening at home... Well, I remember the first person who I spoke to when it transpired that Anne had been murdered, and I knew way before the police told the public, because Nigel called me and told me. And his voice was shaking. It's like, we all need protection now. Now, we don't know what's gone on here. I don't think we're necessarily going to know much more from the press conference coming up. We do know that Assistant Chief Constable Matt Longman of Devon and Cornwall Police is going to give an update on the investigation into Ann Widdecombe's death after a 28-year-old man was arrested yesterday on suspicion of her murder. That press conference will be taking place from Exeter. It was teed up to be now, but these things never happen on time. I think they will just update us on the fact that someone's been arrested. I don't think we'll be learning much more. But there is this... Do you know, whether or not her murder has been politically motivated, the fact that we are all sitting here, and it's not an irrational point of view to have, to think that that could well be what has happened, indicates something just horrific that I just didn't... You know, I came back to broadcasting a few years ago with GB News, which I'd sort of been part of the setup of that and one of their first presenters. And then there was all these protests about GB News, and, you know, I remember when it was sort of... We didn't give away details of where the studios were, because we didn't want all the mad lefties turning up outside and waving their placards and causing a big jamboree. And so that's been going on a long time. But the fact that in, let's say, 4 short years, we are all thinking, do we need panic alarms? Do we need round-the-clock security? Am I safe on public transport? Do I need CCTV at home? You know, could somebody turn up at my home address, my work address, do this, approach me and accost me on the street? Is it just going to be shouting and accusations and bile and vitriol? Or is it going to be physical? And this is where we're at right now, where very serious, very sensible people, Liz Truss, Nigel Farage, are saying, wow, the security risk now to people on the right wing is very real, it is very present, and yet the left keep making out like we are the dangerous ones. They've flipped it around, they've muddled the narrative, they're basically fanning the flames. I've got to the stage, I'm scared, Paul.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I've got a target on my back, but I'm scared now because it feels frightening. We saw what happened to Charlie Kirk. We see what happens. You know, I've had 3 incidents in my own lovely little town where I live, a Lib Dem, be kind town. I love my town, love my village. Been there for a year. I've already had 3 incidents there. I haven't had any in London, weirdly. 3 incidents there where people have felt it OK to come up, shove a camera in my face, and or in my little village pub, some woman in the toilet said I was a fascist, Farage enabler, babies in Gaza, really in my face, you know, spit from her mouth coming on my cheeks, shouting at me. And you think, why can't we just live our lives? I'm sorry, I don't want open borders. I'm sorry, I don't want a nanny state. I'm sorry, I don't want men to be in women's changing rooms. I care about the safety of women. I will keep fighting for it. But why should I have to fight to feel safe in doing it? It's mad.
If you don't fight, though, Alex, and here's the choice that someone like you makes. I don't want to put myself in the same bracket. I am definitely on the right. I definitely get some pretty nasty stuff aimed at me online. On the whole, the stuff in public is always very pleasant and nice. People come up and say hi or whatever. I don't mind that. But if you don't, then it's difficult. People don't understand. We find it at moments like this. It's a chance to reflect not only on Ann's life, but reflect on what we're doing with our own. Obviously, it's very difficult. It's immediately human nature to start reflecting on yourself, because you're like, okay, I'm in that sphere. I have a similar set of views. I'm as passionate as she was, and I know people don't like it. But you have a choice at that point, because we're only here once, thanks to God. And we have a choice to stand up for the things that we believe in. And every single thing that we've said in memorial of Anne has always been about how principled she is, how decent she is, how outspoken she is, how unwavering she is, how she didn't try to fit into the pack. The reason that Anne never moved, the Overton window moved, society moved. And the reason I look up to someone like Ann Widdecombe is because she was a stalwart for the things that she believed in. Alex, I have to say, you are exactly the same. I do this show every Sunday. I see some of the things that throughout the week I get stuff just in my comments, particularly about you, unlike about any of the other stuff I do. And it's very upsetting. I never engage. And what people don't realise is sat there is a young human woman who's just doing a job.
Literally, I'm just trying to help. I'm bothered about young women being safe walking the streets in this country where we are importing a lot of very dangerous men with very, very horrible attitudes. I am worried about young girls going to school and being told, girls going through puberty, you've got to share bathrooms with young men and the psychological damage that will have. I'm worried about the hypersexualisation of society, the fact that pornography is ubiquitous. You know, these are my concerns. I'm worried about the dystopian nature of say something wrong and you could end up in prison. These are good moral things to campaign for, and I have moments where I don't know if I can do it anymore. I have moments where I get such horrible things said to me about me, lies and rumours and misrepresentations and threats, and I go home and I live by myself in the West Country, and what's happened to Anne has bloody terrified me. I didn't sleep a wink last night. My brain is just on fire at the moment, and you have to hold it together and you have to come into school, and I'm channeling my inner Anne because you've got to. But I don't understand how, when you're someone fighting for good, right? I'm not fighting a war on the front line. I'm not, I'm trying to fight for the safety of women, primarily. That is my shtick. It's been my shtick for a long time. And I feel endangered because I'm doing that. That's sick.
Yeah.
That is sick. What has gone on in society? It's just...
Look, I think, it's not for me to speak on behalf of everybody, Alex, but I'm very grateful that you do this. Long before I started working for yours, you were someone I always admired.
Oh, come on! It's not about making about
It's
me.
not about. No. I'm not saying that. But the reason I am saying this is that there will be plenty of people watching and listening to this that will be scared to defend you online. Will be scared to say that they watch Talk Radio, or they.
Don't you bring Talk Sport into this? They're all good over there.
I'm terrified to say I watch Talk Sport.
They know their sports.
But beneath all that fear, because they see what's going on, they are incredibly supportive. You would have seen this as well. For every rabid idiot that comes up to you in public and says something outrageous because they don't see you as a human, there are 10 other people who might just sidle up to you secretly. I've had this and say, I love what you're doing, thank you very much. And if I'm seeing that, then you must be seeing that 100-fold.
I get some nice comment, I do, but that don't keep me safe. Don't help me sleep at night.
No.
Do you know, looking at things like Blue Sky, right? Can we talk about blimmin' Blue Sky? I think, in theory, this is the one social media platform that the Labour Party decided young people were allowed to go on. Going to be banned from all the rest of them. Because it's the alternative to X, because X is a grubby, nasty place. Look, I'm not saying that X is sort of all shining lights and angel choruses, but when you look at the things people are saying on X, on a Blue Sky, it's evil. We'll come back to that, actually, because I do want to talk about that and read out examples. But right now we're going to cross over live to Westminster, where we're joined by the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride MP. Good morning to you, Mel. Thank you so much for making the time to come on the programme. First of all,
Pleasure.
The big story of the last few days has been the brutal murder of Ann Widdecombe. Could I ask you to share your thoughts, your memories of Ann, but also on what this might be telling us about the nature of our society today?
OK, well, good morning, Alex. Yeah, Anne, of course, was a constituent of mine. I served as her local MP for many years. My reaction is one of shock, as I think it has been for everybody. My reflections on Anne was as somebody who was very much a conviction politician. You knew where you stood with her, you knew what she believed. She was uncompromising in that sense, regardless of whether people agreed with her or not. And I think that was a great strength of character. But she was also a very big personality. And my memories of her, as when I first got elected in 2010, was going around to church fetes and garden fetes and agricultural shows with her, meeting people. And of somebody who had a big personality, always had a twinkle in her eye, a dry sense of humour, and a rather infectious laugh, actually. So very, very fond memories of her. And if I could just also say, of course, my thoughts and condolences go out to her family and to the many people that knew and loved Ann Widdecombe.
Let's talk now about the nature of our economy, as you are, Shadow Chancellor, and we are anticipating Andy Burnham coming in and, I don't know, perhaps doing things differently. We haven't got any meat or any bones to put the meat on, quite frankly, of what Burnhamism might look like. He has a manifesto that he has to stick by, where technically, he's not supposed to be increasing taxes on workers. I do remember 2 years ago the Labour Party didn't really have the ability to explain what a working person was. But one has to anticipate there is going to be a change of direction, possibly increases in capital gains tax, possibly something akin to a mansion tax, an extra levy on properties worth over £1.5 million. Also, at the same time, my understanding is our financial situation today is probably the worst it's been for quite a significant amount of time. How perilous if Burnham comes in and pursues a strategy of just trying to get more money to fill government coffers to spend more. How perilous could that be to where we currently are with running a deficit?
So the problem, as you rightly identified, is a huge debt and a significant deficit. That's the borrowing that's adding to that debt. There's a very clear way of dealing with that, which is what we are saying, which is we should get on top of public spending, particularly the welfare bill, get people off benefits and into work, and then bear down on that deficit, but equally get taxes down, particularly on businesses, so that we can grow the economy. And I think, to get back to your question, you know, what's likely to happen, the instincts that we're hearing about with Andy Burnham, and you're right, he tends to be a flip-flopper and it's never quite clear where he stands on issues, but is to lean further into borrowing and to lean further into increased taxes. And of course that is going to continue the kind of damage that the current Chancellor has done to our economy.
Finally, do you think it was a sensible move optically to join a boycott against Nigel Farage standing in Clacton? Because depending, and I think with this one, people will regard the situation based upon on their own bias, on their own political bias. If you support Farage and reform, and if you think the establishment have failed this country for many decades, you might look at Count Binface as quite emblematic of the establishment. If you're somebody who doesn't like Nigel Farage, you might find this whole farcical thing quite entertaining. But is there not a risk that a lot of people out there think that basically people like the Conservative Party boycotting this by-election, when they didn't boycott the Makerfield by-election or that Aberdeen by-election, is frankly laughing at them, disregarding them, treating their voice and their franchise as a joke?
No, I completely disagree with that, and I don't think what has happened with this by-election bears comparison to the other ones that you have mentioned. The reason for the Clacton by-election is that Nigel Farage has decided to trigger that, and the reason for him deciding to trigger that is the scrutiny that he's been receiving around a £5 million donation to him personally from a crypto billionaire based in Thailand, and the fact that that
Who used to
donation
donate
was
to the
not
Conservative
registered.
Party?
Well, whoever
he did,
Christopher Harborne did or
so-
didn't in the past
Well-
donate to. No, but my point is, irrespective of what his previous donations were about, that's not the issue at hand here. The issue at hand here is Nigel Farage did not register or declare that donation. It's being investigated by the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner, who will determine whether the rules have been broken or not.
But
And
do you
what
not think
Nigel
that- do you
Farage
not
is
think
simply
people
doing
are-
is by having this. Sorry, if I could just finish. What he's doing is basically throwing sand in everybody's face and trying to distract from what is going on here by holding this by-election, which incidentally is going to come at huge expense to local
hold on.
taxpayers who are going to have to fund it.
Surely the inevitable aim from, challenging him on not declaring this donation was to make him have a by-election in Clacton anyway. So what's the difference between having one now, when all of the stuff's in the newspaper, all the reporting's been happened, and he's just said, fine, you want me to have to face the voters, let's do it, and you've all gone no.
Well, no, hold on.
Look, at the end of the day,
Nigel
by-election's
Farage
called.
who
Well,
is
don't the people of Clacton deserve to see? Forget whether you think Nigel Farage should have called it or not. One could say Andy Burnham shouldn't have been having that by-election in Makerfield because he shouldn't have, they shouldn't have stood down a local MP to try and ship in the Greater Manchester Med, triggering a by-election there. The point is, there is a by-election, and voters deserve to be able to go and vote for the party they want to vote for. You've disenfranchised anybody in Clacton who may have wanted to vote for you. You don't care. You don't want to represent them. You don't want to give them the option.
So I think every by-election has to be looked at on its merits, and of course all the individual circumstances vary from one by-election to the next. But what is happening here is quite clear, is that a multi-million-pound donation or gift was made to Nigel Farage. He failed to declare that. It is being investigated by the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards, which has not concluded its investigations, but it's quite clear that the fact that Nigel Farage has triggered this by-election is
But
all
what about
about
the people?
obfuscating
Let's talk about the people.
and ducking
people?
transparency.
What about voters?
Well,
why don't they ever
I
get
think the
thought
voters
about?
do matter.
Do they? Because why aren't you putting
Well,
a
the voters
candidate
do.
up then? They matter. You'd be saying Nigel Farage shouldn't have
because
called
this
this
is
by-election. It was the
this
wrong
is a
thing to do, but
farcical-
we're going to fight it.
Alex, this is a farcical by-election, and I think most people looking at this see it for what it is, which is an attempt to obfuscate and avoid scrutiny. And ultimately, of course, if Farage wins this by-election, of course, whilst the investigation has been paused, it will still then continue, and depending on the outcome, there may be yet another by-election. But the basis on which this has been called is not about democracy. It's about trying to obfuscate the fact that he's in a difficult position. The same way, he used to jump up and down at every 5 minutes he was at a press conference. He's run away and hidden over the last few weeks for exactly the same reason.
Mel, look, thank you ever so much for taking time to talk to us
Thank you.
today. Really appreciate it. Mel Stride MP, who's also the Shadow Chancellor. There's something that doesn't stick right. They could have turned and said, we're not going to partake in the by-election in Makerfield. There was an MP there. Labour Party are messing about, just trying to change our Prime Minister by calling a by-election. We're going to boycott it. Now, they couldn't do that because they kept changing the leader of the party, didn't even have by-elections. Nigel Farage said, you're trying to force me to have a by-election, so let's have one. They're like, no, we're going to boycott it and turn it into a farce. At the end of the day, I think voters have every right to say nobody in politics seems to give a hoot about us. It's optional whether we have a by-election. They'll try cancel them. They'll change the way it's done. They will boycott them. They will call them when nobody in Makerfield was asking for one. And it just feels like democracy now is optional in this country. And I think actually, and I'm not doing this because I'm saying Nigel Farage should have called that by-election. I'm not saying that, because part of me thinks you should have waited for the inevitable by-election, but I think he calculated they'd stitch it up as much as they could, leave the clock running on this, they'll be preparing, they'll be colluding, so on and so forth. So he wanted to give himself the best chance. Now, whether it's the right or the wrong thing to do, it depends, I think, on what you think about Nigel Farage and whether at the moment this is lawfare trying to stitch him up, or whether, you know, there needs to be genuine scrutiny of what's going on. But it's clear, isn't it, that the political establishment just pick and choose if they fight an election, on what grounds, how that election is done, whether it takes place in the first place. Democracy is optional. They want to play only if they can win. And at the same time, nobody's sitting here going, well, what about the people? Don't they get to have a blimmin' voice?
Well, with all due respect to Mal Stride, this is one of the reasons I don't see myself ever going into politics. Mal Stride can stand there and say the party line. He cannot believe that this isn't circumnavigating democracy by playing a political game to basically try and undermine Nigel Farage because he's a political opponent. We talked previously about how the left can coalesce. The right are terrible at coalescing. I understand why the Greens and the Lib Dems and Labour might pull this trick, but the Tories, why are they getting involved in this? They're getting involved in this because this is purely about self-preservation. It's each for their own. It's not about the constituents, it's not about the country, it's about preserving the Conservative Party because they are very much on the back foot. What Nigel Farage did, for right or for wrong, was jumping ahead of the system, a system which is working deliberately against him. Now, for my money, the £5 million donation is within those 12 months and he is likely to be in a little bit of trouble for it. But he's playing against a process that's unfair. The process is completely designed. By the way, they obtained the information likely to be in a less than legal way. They've then used it against him. Nobody's looking at this. The Tories seem to believe that they own the right. And unfortunately, you can only own the right if you are right-wing. And about 10% of the Conservatives...
if people actually want to vote for you, and they didn't in the last election.
And that's my point, because they are not right-wing, so people don't vote for them. And the reason they're not considered right-wing is because of all the disastrous policies and things that they did, from the Boris wave down, from locking us down harder and longer, for not protecting our country's borders, for not conserving British values, which is really all that their modus operandi should be. It doesn't make any sense to me. So Mal Stride can toe the party line and say whatever he likes, but surely Mal Stride's not a stupid man. Surely he knows that this circumnavigates the democratic process. So what if this is what Nigel Farage has done? Fight him.
Yeah, well, it's the same as they said we're going to boycott the Makerfield by-election. I mean, it's just...
Which they could have done, by the way.
They could have done. This sense of picking and choosing if they want to partake in democracy or not, or, you know, changing the rules of the game, you know, messing about with the competition rather than just entering it pure and simple. It's been going on too long. It's been going on since Brexit. It's 2016 that started all of this connivance, and this all doesn't matter. The voter's voice doesn't matter. If we don't like it, we'll overturn it. We'll use every trick at the book and invent some new ones to make sure that we get the result we want by messing about with the system. I was going to use a swear word then. And I was like, and it didn't begin with an M. But, I mean, look, people can make up their own minds. They will make up their own minds about this. I think that this sort of smug countenance at the moment the establishment have got when it comes to Farage versus bin face, I think that will turn.
I seriously do not believe, and I'll be held to account on this because I'm saying it live on national television. I do not believe Count Binface will win that election. I do not believe that the people of Clacton do not support Nigel Farage. He will increase his majority, and Count Binface will get a significant number of votes. But all that's going to do is illuminate the message that Nigel Farage wants the rest of the country to see.
Yeah.
Is this a democracy? He has said, and he could lose. You know, there's no way he's guaranteed to win. I'm saying I think he will win. But he is saying, look, I'm giving this to the people of Clacton to decide. And if they decide once and then he wins and then he goes back and 3 people in a standards committee say, no, that wasn't good enough, you've got to go back. What is that going to say?
Yeah.
The optic is obvious then. It is exactly what Nigel Farage is talking about. And if you want to change absolutely everything we talked about in this show or you've spoken about this weekend and you want to remove the threat, then we're going to have to keep fighting the good fight. And I want to say to the Tories, what are you doing? What exactly are you doing? Because there's no way you're getting back into power on your own. The only chance you've got any chance of being involved in anything at all is if you support the right. And they're not supporting the right. I don't know who they support.
Right, now listen, let's go back to the big story of the day. We are waiting for a police press conference. Assistant Chief Constable Matt Longman of Devon and Cornwall Police in Exeter will be addressing the public on the latest developments. There has been an arrest in the Ann Widdecombe murder case. We understand that a 28-year-old man from South Yorkshire was arrested yesterday. But let's speak to a great friend of this channel, security specialist Will Geddes. Will, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, you must have been watching this unfold very closely. It is your sort of domain. You understand a lot about providing protection and security measures to people in the public eye. What is your read on the situation so far? The fact that initially they arrested a 26-year-old man, held him, and then realised he was nothing to do with the investigation and released him. They now seem to have somebody else. We're waiting for details. But what we do know is this is an elderly woman who was savagely beaten in her own home at around what we estimate to be about midday in broad daylight. What on earth do you think's gone on here?
It's really difficult to tell, Alex. Hi, thanks for having me on the show. I mean, it's one of those situations which we all dread, and especially for someone who is old and someone who is generally a very liked individual. I mean, Anne had some very strong views on various things, but ultimately she was somewhat harmless. And that's one of the big concerns that's prevailing currently in society, currently in culture. And the fact that MPs, influencers, spokespeople like yourself, Alex, are almost being edged towards a slight concern about what are the things that you want to vocalize. And this whole issue of free speech in the United Kingdom, it seems to be getting far more restricted and almost suffocated to a certain extent because of the fears of recrimination. And the stats back this up. I mean, for example, since 2019, the number of threats against MPs has tripled. I mean, even in this year already, there is 976 reports of threats being made against MPs. And in the wake of Joe Cox and David Amess, you know, understandably, people are concerned.
Is there any sense as well that there is that messaging being used by people in positions of power is stoking up tensions further? I say this because I've recently learned of a phrase called stochastic terrorism, which is this idea that you create this sort of existential threat. You demonise somebody, you tell the world that they are a threat to democracy or dangerous for society at large, and you do that quite specifically in the hope that it prevents them from being able to go about their daily existences. And of course, we have seen, you know, Joe Cox tragically murdered during the Brexit debate, David Amess killed by an Islamist, very different motives, very different parts of the country, different times. Charlie Kirk in America, assassinated for being an influencer with certain viewpoints. Is there a risk that when we have a government which has repeatedly used phrases like far right, extremist, dangerous, division, that they are adding to this problem?
Okay, there's quite a bit to unpack on that one, Alex. I mean, the first thing I think we have to be very clear about is we don't know the motive behind the attack on Anne. No. And at the moment, it is pure speculation. And unfortunately, in these periods between the police providing information and the incident itself taking place, a lot of people are going to want to fill that void with their speculation of what's going on. And I think we've got to be very, very cautious about that until we know exactly what it was, whether it was a burglary or whether it was someone who was it was a recrimination or it was a retaliation against something that Anne had said that they opposed or found offensive or felt that was a motive to drawing them to attack her. So we don't know right now, Alex. But to cover the point that you just made, which I think is the really important one, is the fact that this rhetoric of saying that someone who has an opposing view is offensive, and someone who is saying something which is not within the parameters of someone else's agreeable nature, rather than having a logical and pragmatic debate about it and saying, you know what, everyone's entitled to an opinion, people are taking it in a much more vitriolic way. And we're seeing this roll out over social media, for example. And social media is a massively influencing tool. But then when we throw into the mix groups like Riku, which have recently been discovered as an entity that was set up to combat terrorism and be used as a counterterrorism tool, which was where the Home Office would use deniable third parties to propagate and proliferate messages on their behalf without it being able to be attributed to the government. We have to be so suspicious about what we see online, but also be very careful about becoming massively emotive to it. And the one thing I'm saying to a lot of people right now, Alex, and you know this really, really well, is be careful. What is that message trying to make you do? Is that message that you're seeing on TikTok or on Instagram or on X for that matter? And you know, we can talk about X becoming far broader a reservation, which in some ways is great, but other ways potentially quite dangerous. Whether we feel that we're actually being manipulated without our necessary permission or knowledge.
It's very fascinating, actually, because without doubt, there's a huge amount of psyopery coming from countries such as China, Iran,
Yep.
Russia, who are using sort of psychological manipulation, which is psyops have existed forever, ladies and gentlemen. But it's just far more sophisticated and digital now, enabling hostile governments to do this stuff at arm's length, drive resource into specific stuff, often on both sides of the debate, just to create that friction and that division. I'm interested, you brought up Riku, actually, and I want to ask you more about that, because I would imagine listeners at home, their ears pricked up at what you've just said. So it's worth circling back and delving a bit deeper. Explain to me in more detail about Riku, but mainly explain to me what they have done, the sort of things they have seeded to the public via third parties in order potentially to manipulate them.
Okay, so there's a few things. Now, RICU stands for the Research Information Communications Unit, and it was set up originally by a former MI6 officer who was specific in PSYOPs operations and was very, very capable in knowing how the mechanics of these things work. Now, where RICU was created was to be this sort of independent, non-attributable group, if you like, or pond, let's call it that, of influencers, information, images, which could be manipulated to a certain extent. And you mentioned about foreign and hostile state actors, you know, Russia, Iran, China, as just to name a few, who have seeded TikTok and social media with messages that they want to create division by. And one of those things which has really come through is things like the huge amounts of supposed knife crime and watch robberies that take place in London. Now, I live in central London. You know, I don't wear a bad watch, and okay, I might not be the most viable target for anybody who wanted to try and take my watch off me. But I know some people who've had their watches taken off them. I know some people who've experienced some sort of knife crime, but no more than any other major metropolitan city, probably around, or capital city around the world in many regards, Alex. So there is some truth behind Sadiq Khan's message, which he sent out a few months ago, basically saying London was being sort of publicized as this high-risk location. And if we speak to people outside of London or certainly overseas, that they've received this message that it's a war zone here, and it really isn't. Yes, you've got to have your wits about you, and yes, don't walk around staring at your phone, because that's probably not the smartest thing to do anyway, because you might fall into a pothole. Probably has a greater chance than anything else. But RICU, going back to them, some of the things that they've been publicizing or utilizing, where originally was supposed to be a counterterrorism narrative, now it's been moving into, for example, the Southport killer. Great example, where everybody knew who the perpetrator of the Southport attack was, his nationality, but they started to conflagrate some of that message into he wasn't an illegal immigrant, he wasn't this, he wasn't that. and again confusing the general public. And then going back to what we
so the Welsh choir boy narrative in many respects. Here he is on Doctor Who, you know, blah 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 blah.
You got it. You got it, absolutely.
And that was our own government. You're suggesting it was an agency department who were doing that quite willfully. I mean, could you say
allegedly, Alex.
Allegedly. Yeah, we've got to make that very clear. And of course, we don't have any comments from Riku. We should probably seek to get it. I'm not sure they actually would provide
I don't think you'll ever get one.
They might not. They might pretend they don't exist.
They don't. They're a shadowy agency.
But how pernicious and sinister is this? Because some people might say, well, that's okay, because, you know, actually the flip side of that would be a general public deeply alarmed, very volatile, likely to take to the streets, weighing up the risks. Perhaps is best if we mollify the public, otherwise there are going to be, you know, fights in the streets. And some people might say that is what a government needs to do, protect itself. But is there an element to this that is sort of somehow more sinister?
Well, I mean, to cover your first bit, there were riots in the street, Alex, as we recall.
Well, there were, yeah. When the information finally did get out, yeah.
Yeah, but also filling that void of information. This is the thing that the general public, you know, your viewers, your listeners to this show, for example, smart, informed people who will be taking their information from various different sources. Everybody or nobody trusts MSM anymore. So they come to channels like Talk, and they come here to try and get some sort of explanation, some kind of narrative around whatever the subject matter might be, and some sort of impartiality that is not going to be pushed into one particular direction. However, where Riku becomes a bit of a problem is it muddies the water, and where the general public feel that there's a void or there is a misdirection. Let's put it that way. So in the same way as I've always explained to people, misinformation, disinformation. Misinformation is basically you're missing information. Disinformation is directed information. So they're directing you into a specific thinking, a viewpoint, emotive reaction, whatever it might be. So, you know, when we talk about the general public are not going to be silly. They're not going to be naive. There is obviously those within, you know, various communities who will be, but the vast majority will take a little pinch of information from various different places and make their own mind up. But that is becoming a harder process for many people. And because information's so fast and moving so quickly, people don't necessarily have the opportunity or maybe even an inclination to properly provenance whether that information is correct or true.
Cycling back to the shocking case of Ann Widdecombe, we are still waiting for Assistant Chief Constable Matt Longman from Devon and Cornwall Police to begin that press conference. As soon as it happens, we will cross live to it. But it seems difficult to talk about, but Ann was very brave. She always said she wasn't going to compromise her life. You know, when she had been told people had sent death threats, she just said, chuck them in the bin. She perhaps unwisely had her name of her property at the end of her driveway, Widdecombe's Rest. What should people be thinking about and doing who might have a bit of profile, a bit of position, or perhaps they don't? Maybe it's just someone in their local community who does something which puts them at risk of retribution. It could be someone who works with offenders. It could be someone who works in the legal practices. It could be even someone in the education sphere. We have seen, of course, you know, the Batley school teachers still in hiding. This doesn't just affect people who pop up on screens or sit on green benches. There's a lot of ordinary people in society who might feel that they are at risk. What sort of measures do people need to be thinking about? Because we live in a world where everything is doxable, let's say. We spend our lives putting photographs online of our properties, of our local pubs, of our kids in school productions. So much information about us, where once upon a time, to know someone, you had to physically meet them. To see their house, you had to walk up and knock on the door. So much of what we do, say, think, believe, where we go, who we associate with, is so easily traceable now, and we, without doubt, whatever Riku might say, live in a far more violent country, I would suggest, than we did 10, 20 years ago, and we live in a far more divided country than we did 10, 20 years ago. Do people really now have to start thinking, OK, Britain's febrile, I need to start taking special measures of my own?
Within reason, yes. And I think you should. I think everybody should, regardless of what your political leaning is and how much you vocalize it. I think we all have to be very careful because our digital footprint is pretty much could be an open book for any threats, whether that be scammers, whether it be people who are opposed to what we believe or think or say or whatever it might be. So one of the things that I've said to a lot of people is stalk yourself. Go online. There is a lot of OSINT tools out there, open source intelligence tools. And in fact, I'm going to be putting something up on my Instagram probably in the next week or so. So, I mean, look out for that. I'm going to be giving you a load of links out there, which, to be honest, please use responsibly, but could show you how much of your own personal information is readily available for the person who is determined enough to want and research you, find out where you live, what you do, what your pattern of life is. And that's the key thing. It's the pattern of life. Any threat is going to look at, when do you leave the house? When do you return to the house? How many people live in the house? Do you leave the lights on? Do you have a dog? Do you have a cat? Where do you go to work? Where do you work out? Where do you go and eat? So we have to be very conscious of our patterns of life. And whenever I've advised someone who's had a threat against them, first thing I'll always say is randomize your pattern of life. Do not start following the routine or continue to follow the routine that you would generally follow. But in terms of your digital footprint, by stalking yourself, imagine you are stalking yourself. Go online, see how much there is out there readily available. Now, depending on the expertise behind it will depend on how deep you can go, because it is, most information's available out there. It's just knowing where to find it. So a lot of that information you can remove from being online. You can remove from your digital footprint, or you can bury it far, far deeper to make it far less easy for someone to find out. So, one of the things I think you and I were talking about a few weeks ago was about things like, for example, Companies House. If you have a company, do you as a director have your own personal home address attributed to that company? Or is it an old company that you've subsequently closed or dissolved, which you've forgotten is still going to be listed on Companies House? And at the time that you had that company, 10 years ago or whatever, you've actually had your home address on there. You can change all that. You can remove all that sort of information. So you don't make it that necessarily easy for someone to find out who you are and what you're all about.
Very important advice there, Will. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to join us today. The brilliant Will Geddes, security specialist. I'm going to be having a Zoom with Will later. I'm tooling up. I've got people coming to my house. I'm fortifying the gaff. And Will's going to walk me through a few things as well. But it does strike me that we aren't just talking about little old me or little old you, whose mugs go on the box. Increasingly, we are talking about a magistrate who, a convicted criminal comes out of prison and wants to seek vengeance against. We are talking about a school teacher who a community leader has deemed inappropriate. That without doubt, and there's something that has fueled extremism and dehumanisation. There's a great word used by Liz. We were talking about this word dehumanisation yesterday. That I sort of say that social media is the avatarization of people. We don't see people as humans like you and I having a conversation. It is a picture, a few sentences of little digital letters, a sentiment, a characterization, not a real person. And I think it's enabling people where emotions and rhetoric become so heightened, so inflated and flammable online. This does bleed down into reality, and I think a lot of people out there, it's sort of like the other half. It's the sort of, the other half of the same coin, isn't it? Where on one hand you can be thrown into prison for something you say on social media. On the other hand, you could be attacked for something you have said on social media. Yeah,
it's incredible. I mean, listening to Will there, it's a stark reminder that we all have to be careful, irrespective of whether you do what we do for a living or whether you're the local plumber and you post pictures of your kids at the school play. You do have to be much more protective of your own personal information than probably most people are. I try to just talk about what I do for a living, and it's either political or humorous or some way. But I'm sure I know this for a fact, up until some time ago, unbeknownst to me, my number was available online.
Wow.
And it wasn't until I'd started receiving a number of messages from people I had no idea who they were. One or two you think, well, OK, perhaps it's somewhere. But then one person got in touch with me that was a listener to this show, actually, and I said to them, just can I ask, because I know I don't know you, but I trust you more than the other randoms. Where was my number? And they told me, and I was like, oh my goodness, I had no idea it was there. Just stuff like that. And people who are able to contact you directly like that, it's unnerving.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not offended by it. I'm not scared
no, I'm sure
by
it's all
it.
done with sort of good
And
intent,
most of it was all absolutely fine. They thought it was a great opportunity to communicate with me directly. But it's just so important to protect yourself, even when you don't realise. You know, I've never really stalked myself.
Can you stalk me, please?
I will stalk you, yeah.
Please, as a friend, can you become my stalker?
Oh, I have done. I've got files anyway.
Do you have a
see
shrine?
the AP file, yeah. Yeah. I've actually built a statue of you from the hair
that you've plucked out every time you've come on the show.
Not watching, yeah.
Right, I'm really glad about that. But seriously, no, I'm gonna be. I must admit, it's quite embarrassing to admit, but on Friday when I found out that it had been a murder and all the rest of it of poor darling Anne, I suddenly got so freaked out. I was phone bashing. I was asking every male that I know, can you come stay with me? And everyone thought I'd gone mad. They weren't treating it that seriously. And I'm like, if you were in my shoes right now, if you knew how I felt, you'd realise that this isn't balmy at all. That I actually did have this sense that I just wanted a living, breathing human male in my house. So if there's a bump in the night or a knock at the door that I haven't expected, I can send them instead, first line of defence. Some sort of nice high testosterone individual.
It's not cool that you immediately feel that way, and yeah, there's a sort of boundary here. I never know whether to cross, whether we talk about it more or talk about it less, because there is, no matter what's going on, there are plenty of people out there who lack empathy entirely. So they are not going to feel any of the human emotions that you are invoking by talking about your own.
In fact, what I say is, frankly, we are waiting, by the way, for the police to come and make a statement shortly. I think we're crossing live to it now. Here we go. Let's have a listen.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Assistant Chief Constable Matt Longman, been leading this operation. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'd like to give you an update on where we find ourselves today. Our investigation into the death of 78-year-old Ann Widdecombe has continued to develop over the past 24 hours. Shortly after 9 p.m. on Saturday, the 11th of July, a 28-year-old white British man was arrested at an address in Rotherham, South Yorkshire, on suspicion of the murder of Miss Widdecombe. We were supported by officers from Counter-Terrorism Police North East and South Yorkshire Police who carried out the arrest on behalf of Devon and Cornwall. Miss Widdecombe's family have been informed of the updates and continue to be supported by our specialist officers. Our thoughts remain with her family and friends at this incredibly difficult time. At this point, there is still no information to suggest that this is a terrorism-related incident, and at this point we are not looking for anyone else in connection with this murder. We retain primacy of this investigation, and detectives remain open-minded about the potential motive. At this stage, there is nothing to suggest that it was politically motivated. A cordon is still in place as officers continue inquiries at the scene, and we anticipate that this will be the case for the next few days. The local community can also expect to see a heightened police presence in the coming weeks to provide reassurance to them. However, I wish to reassure you that we do not have any information to suggest that there is any wider threat to the public at this time. We're grateful to our colleagues in South Yorkshire for the assistance that they provided, and they'll continue to support through our investigation. Over the past few days, we've received in excess of 120 reports of information to assist us in our investigation into our major incident public portal. I'd just like to thank all those who've taken the time to contribute that information, and ask anyone who has not yet submitted any information that they hold to do so as a priority. We're aware of online and public speculation, particularly with regards to motive. Again, I urge people not to share or engage with that speculation. It's unhelpful, it doesn't aid our investigation, and particularly it's distressing to the family and friends of Miss Widdecombe. We understand that there's a huge appetite for information, but progressing and protecting the integrity of our investigation is paramount now. We recognise there is still some way to go in this case, and the release of any information will be a decision made on an operational basis. I would like to thank the local communities, the wider public and the media for their ongoing support and patience. I would ask them to continue to support us in the next stage of this investigation. Any relevant information, images or footage can be reported via our major incident public portal, and you can follow the links and QR codes available on our website to achieve this. Information can also be passed anonymously to the independent charity Crime Stoppers. Thank you very much. I'd like to hand over now to the Chief Constable to say a few words.
Thank you, Matt, and good morning, everybody. Thank you, first of all, to Matt, the Senior Investigating Officer, and the wider teams here in Devon and Cornwall that have mounted an extraordinary response to a horrific murder of a very prominent public figure. The support that Devon and Cornwall Police has received from our colleagues and our partners, both in the region and nationally, has been second to none. The operation has been running at a lightning pace for 48 hours, and I am really pleased that we have a suspect firmly in custody and that will undergo some further work from us today. Well done to all. This is clearly British policing at its very best. Thank you to media colleagues for your patience in working with us over the last 2 days, allowing us to focus on the most important thing here, which is to catch a dangerous man and bring them to justice. My appreciation to you for that. Thank you. And finally, my thanks also goes to the public in giving us the information that we need to progress this investigation. And I reiterate the ongoing message and direction around speculation and how unhelpful and how that can hinder a major investigation of this nature. But thank you, everybody, and thank you to the teams.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. So just before we took a break, we had a press conference from Devon and Cornwall Police from Exeter, where we were told that they have arrested a suspect who I believe to be from Rotherham, 28 years old, a white British male, on suspicion of the murder of Ann Widdecombe. We do not know if the person in question was known to Anne. They have reiterated that there is nothing at present to suggest it was political in nature. They also added they're not looking for anyone else in connection with her death, but they have warned not to fill voids of information with speculation, enabling the police to carry on doing important work to secure a conviction, to guarantee a free and fair trial and make sure people are brought to justice and the public are protected. I'm sure over coming days, weeks, perhaps months, we will learn more about who the person is, why this awful, tragic, terrifying incident may have taken place. But we will heed that warning. I've been quite diligent in suggesting that we don't want to make any assumptions. I mean, it is a statistic that 9 out of 10 people know their killers. But all we know is a man, 28 years old, from Rotherham, has been arrested, is in custody and is facing questioning, and the police are not looking for anyone else in connection with her death. I still think it is worthy talking about safety, talking about people in the public eye and the violent divisions we face in society, the dehumanisation of people with opposing political viewpoints. That is a conversation that persists regardless of this utterly abhorrent, heartbreaking and harrowing incident. And it's a conversation I think we desperately do need to have and have needed to have for a very long time. Let's speak now to Philip Kissley, who's a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum. Philip, thank you so much for coming on the programme, as always. We do live in an age, I mean, what I was saying earlier is the fact that we are concerned that this could be politically motivated. The police are saying it's nothing to suggest it was. But it holds a mirror up, doesn't it, to where we are currently at as a society. And there have been a chain of events in recent years, whether it's the murders of Joe Cox, David Amos, Charlie Kirk, whether it is this statistic that death threats against MPs have trebled in the last 4 years. It is true that we have seen Palestine Action being prescribed as a terrorist organisation because they took sledgehammers to police officers, destroyed properties. We have seen calls inciting for jihad on our streets because of incidents in foreign affairs taking place 1,000 miles away. We are constantly seeing play out pantomimes of hatred, of extremely dark rhetoric, of amplified emotions online, of essentially, I would say, psychological grooming of people online, whether that's causing them to self-harm or question their identities and their genders or believe people from other political factions are evil. And no one seems to have much of an answer of what we do about this. And what I would say is my big concern is the very people saying, well, we've got to take 16-year-olds off social media, are also the people often using language such as fascist and far-right and extremist that really turn the volume up, turn the temperature up when it comes to political debate. How do we row back from this, Philip?
Well, first of all, Alex, it's great to see you. And this last few days has just been an emotional rollercoaster. I knew Anne like you were, and I was just looking at some of the pictures I have of us together. I posted some online. My memories of her are also bound up with Peter Whittle, and I was just thinking about a conversation we had just a few months ago, about 7 or 8 months ago, about Peter's passing, and now another gigantic figure of the conservative, philosophical conservative right philosophical movement is now gone. The response to her death online has been nothing short of disgusting from certain elements of the left, the be kind element of the left. And you're right, when people throw words and phrases around like far right, neo-Nazi, particularly all those kinds of things, which are clearly and utterly not true. They are just weaponized to mobilize other people against you. And I've been on the receiving end of this. I've had death threats. I know you have. So we both know how this feels. We're in a situation where this is legitimized, actually, not only by lunatics with mental health problems online, but the broader culture that sees anything now that isn't identitarian and far left as not only a threat, but something evil that needs to be wiped out. Now, that infests everywhere. It infests the institutions, it infests the mainstream heritage media, it infests the blob, all of these things. There is a mindset that, while it doesn't go as far as saying these people should be wiped out, there is a mindset that is basically, oh, well, you know, what do you expect when you spout such evil? And we've moved into this. It's quite odd because these people think they are so sophisticated, and yet they are using a kind of Old Testament language to describe what they are not and what we are. Now, this is very, very dangerous. We didn't used to have this. We didn't used to have this fundamental divide that places a kind of red flag on people and says, what, you know, these are fair game for abuse, for attack, for all of this kind of stuff. Now, I think
I was just going to say, Philip, you were speaking such sense, but I want to add to what you're saying with representations of reality, because, you know, it might be 10 to noon on a Sunday, but I actually want to read out, I won't read words that Ofcom do not think are suitable, but I want to read out what has been written on Blue Sky. Blue Sky, of course, was the alternative left-wing X, the Be Kind's own platform. These are examples of messages. Rest in beep, Ann Widdecombe, you won't be missed. I was just telling the offspring Ann Widdecombe had died when there was a massive bang from the kitchen. A can of beer had opened itself in celebration. We should take that as a sign. You may feel uncomfortable and hot right now, but that's nothing to how Ann Widdecombe is feeling. All you horrible people saying nasty things about Ann Widdecombe now that she's dead. Well done. Carry on. Spare a thought today for the literal effing devil who now has to spend an eternity with Ann Widdecombe. You should never speak ill of the dead, only good. Ann Widdecombe is dead. Good. Rot in hell, Ann Widdecombe. Absolutely heartbreaking to see Ann Widdecombe murdered by a white British man. Those are her favourite. We're all complaining about the heatwave. Meanwhile, Ann Widdecombe has literally just arrived in hell. The death of Ann Widdecombe does not want any tact or respect, let alone sympathy. She is a cynical, cold-hearted bigot. I hope she enjoys hell. Good riddance to this ghastly, bigoted beep. Good riddance, the nasty, rancid old beep. A truly vile woman in every single aspect. Nothing but hatred spewed from her lips. Look, Ann Widdecombe was a woman of God. She adored everybody. There was a wonderful story someone told me of when a young left-wing journalist had come to challenge her, and she said, come in, have a cup of tea. Ann Widdecombe is none of those things that those people are saying, and you've got to remember that we don't even know why she has been murdered. This was in the hours after it was reported she had died. This is the sort of mindset that you were talking about, and I wanted to read out those examples in case people didn't believe us.
No, I could show you, messages from my inbox and messages underneath my messages, and sometimes I look on your Twitter feed and I think, oh my God.
I don't look at that comment section anymore.
But what this reminds me of was when Margaret Thatcher died, and that outpouring of utter hatred from the Be Kind. There is a sense of mental health here. There's a sense that these people are unhinged. It must be really difficult to live with such hatred in your heart, but it also must be difficult to live with such, or it probably isn't actually, a complete lack of self-awareness of who and what you are. I think the key thing we need to do is we need to address this as a society and think about what we do here, because it's only going to get worse, because with every one of these, terrible incidents and the response to these terrible incidents, the response legitimizes. Okay, that's the key problem. It's a knock-on effect. So it's an echo chamber. But the thing is, and I repeat this, it isn't just an echo chamber online. It's an establishment echo chamber. And that is the real problem we've got. We have to pull apart all of those mechanisms which are embedded in identity politics in our institutions, and we need to start again. This is another one of those things. This is intensely personal. It's intensely personal to the people that knew her, to the people that admired her. She was principled. She was intelligent. Do you know what? She was really, really kind. When I spent time with her, she took time out to watch my commentary, and she'd say things like, "Oh, I heard you talk about education there. That was really interesting. I agreed with every word. You should come out of education and concentrate on policy," and all of those kinds of things. So she was always encouraging. She was one of those people. She was a one-off in a way, and the kind of people we don't make in our society anymore. And it's a massive shame that we don't, because she had such insight. She always went back to first principles. So she was a clear and dynamic thinker, but she was really human as well, and humane, and she cared about people. She was the polar opposite what they're saying she is.
She's literally the sort of person that the Be Kind movement should love. A woman who's dedicated her life to protecting animals, to serving the public, to having a faith, to, speaking and welcoming anybody from any side of the political spectrum, who welcomed scrutiny, who had a sense of humour. She's exactly what they keep telling us we should all be. And this is my worry. My worry is the people who have ownership of morality in this country, or believe that they do, the hashtag Be Kind Brigade, use it as a mask. They use it as a disguise to hide behind, to continue perpetrating demonisation.
Well, it's the upside down world of everything, isn't it? You just described precisely what she was there. She was a genuinely kind human being. She was genuinely intelligent. She was genuinely dynamic, all of the things they should like. But because she was on the opposite side of the political and philosophical spectrum, they have to hate her, and they see her as a threat. Again, I keep coming back to Margaret Thatcher, because they reacted to the death of Margaret Thatcher in exactly the same way. What they don't like, Alex, actually, is strong, intelligent, thoughtful women.
I was going to ask you that. I wanted to ask you that. I don't like making things about gender, but what I have seen recently, whether it's coming from the hard right, from the Rupert Lowe fan base, or whether it's coming from the hard left, there is a special type of spite and violence of language. And actually, I'd say this is true to women on the left wing of politics. I may not like her or share her politics, but I would imagine Jess Phillips has a pretty horrific time. I feel as if there's a particular intensity and brutality to the attacks when it comes to women.
I think there is, because I think women pose a threat to a particular kind of male, and you see that, you know, especially the online women who've never done a day's work in their lives, who've never had a sexual relationship, who are probably addicted to porn, all of that kind of stuff. There's a particular kind of male here that finds women incredibly threatening and frightening, so they lash out. And again, this is the horseshoe of politics, isn't it? You know, it's the far right and it's the far left, but also it's not just the extremes. There's a softer kind of misogyny as well, and again, that goes right across both areas of politics. So there's something there. I don't want to get all that identitarian, because certainly this isn't the time, and I wouldn't do it anyway, but you cannot ignore this kind of misogyny. And it really is horrible when people are talking about equality and diversity and inclusion on the one hand, but also equally horrible on the other when they're talking about families and the importance of having children and bringing children up, and, and immigrants posing a threat to our women and children and all of that kind of stuff. So we have a misogyny problem, and we really need to deal with it.
Philip, thank you ever so much. I know you and I both are not exactly hashtag Me Too movement, but it is, you know, we are circling around a situation where sexism is becoming extremely toxic. Paul, we have about a minute before we shuffle off to our big, fat, juicy commercial break. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the left, in many ways, have co-opted many of the arguments that you're trying to make with regards to misogyny. For instance, you know, I always say be very suspicious of the male feminist, because they are always the person that that you need to look out for the most. They're always the person that have got the anonymous account online that was saying horrible things about women. But it's a safe harbour on the left to do all the things that they complain about. I don't think that's hyperbole, and I don't want to connect it to Ann's dreadful murder, but this is an opportunity for us to actually once again shine a spotlight on the left and say, are these people really what they say they are, and what are their objectives?
Do you know, one thing I thought was fascinating that Phillips spoke about there, which is something that I really think needs investigating, the connection between people watching lots of pornography and anxiety issues, males feeling inadequate, the growth of anti-female hatred. I think it has a really strange effect on the brain, almost like a sort of A-class drug, and I think we need to have a very close look at what that might be doing societally. We're taking a short break. After that, we're going to be joined by the former Chief Constable of Northumbria Police, Sue Sim. Put the kettle on, and we'll see you in just a moment.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, of course, we have had in the last hour updates from the Devon and Cornwall Police saying that a man has been arrested, a 28-year-old white British male from Rotherham, for the suspected murder of Ann Widdecombe. They are not giving much more information. They want us, understandably and rightly, to not engage in over-speculation. We do not know if the assailant was known to Anne or not. They have reinforced that at this stage, they have nothing to suggest it was politically motivated, but nothing as yet has been ruled out. I'm looking at some of the slaps that the BBC and Sky are putting up where they've just decided it's not politically motivated. We don't know. The police said we don't know, OK? So that, to me, is playing a bit fast and loose with the interpretation of what they've said. But, look, we shouldn't speculate. We don't know. But what we do know is the general public are rightly reeling at the mindless, brutal, wicked murder of a big political figure. Let's speak now to Sue Sim, former Chief Constable of Northumbria Police. Sue, I feel like there's a sort of tug of war. It's going to sound quite cynical. I feel like there's a sort of will here where some people desperately want this not to be political and some people who might rather like it to be. And we are, without doubt, we've been talking a lot on this programme today about threats to politicians because that is something that exists in its own right. We know that threats to politicians have gone up 3 times in the past 4 years. But we're not speculating about what has happened to Anne. But it is becoming already, I can feel the tension. There's a sort of strange tug of war that there are people who sort of are willing there to be a certain outcome. How difficult is it for police to operate under those circumstances? And it's not just necessarily whether the motivation for something. I remember this same tension following the disappearance of Nicola Bulley, where people were speculating, well, she's been murdered. Was it a tragic accident? And there were huge complaints against the conduct of that particular operation. The Chief Constable there of Devon and Cornwall Police praising his forces, praising cooperating forces for actually doing things swiftly and professionally. What is your reaction so far to how things have been conducted, what we know and what has been released to the public?
Good afternoon, Alex. Firstly, I'd like to offer my condolences to the family and to the friends of Ann Widdecombe for this dreadful, tragic murder. It's a terrible, terrible incident to have occurred. I also want to reassure people that even though we're talking about Devon and Cornwall, which is a middle-sized force, it's nowhere near as big as the Metropolitan, when murders are committed, the standards and the expertise of the officers involved are the same all around the country. So I want to make that very clear. There has been a significant amount of confusion concerning the time frame. We now believe from Devon and Cornwall that the murder occurred around about 12:30 on Wednesday afternoon, and that the police themselves were informed and attended the scene at about 20 to 12 the following day. People quite rightly are asking, why weren't we all informed then? The issue can be as simple as the importance of making sure that the family are informed about the tragedy before the press and the public. So that could account for the time frame. In relation, and I know that there's a great deal of concern about why the CCTV wasn't released and why descriptions weren't released. Well, as we can see, the arrest of this believed perpetrator occurred 270 miles away from the scene. The police would not have wanted to have made him aware that they were indeed coming after him to arrest him. So that can account for why the CCTV wasn't released. In relation to the motivation, my understanding at the moment, the police are saying that they are open-minded as to why and how the murder occurred. They have said categorically that they do not believe that it is a terrorism incident, and they have also said that they have nothing to believe that it is politically motivated. It is very important, as you quite rightly said, that people should not be speculating about what's happened. If you believe you have evidence in relation to this dreadful, dreadful incident, then make sure that you inform your local police force, tell the officers so that they can add it to the evidence base that they will be gathering in relation to this crime.
Now, no two crimes are the same. The conduct of an investigation will never be identical with different cases. But what are we likely to see transpire now over coming days? One assumes a suspect is detained with the police. He's going to be interrogated with the hope potentially that will lead to a charge. I mean, they've ruled out anybody else now in connection to this. It seems to me they think they've got their man. Can we anticipate things might move quite quickly now?
Well, what they're saying is that they're not looking for anybody more at the moment. I have to sort of put you straight in that
Please
they
do.
will not be interrogating him. They will be interviewing him under Police and Criminal Evidence Act regulations. Now, one of the things that your viewers might not be aware of is if he's been arrested in Rotherham, I believe they've said, they will need to transport him down to a station within the Devon and Cornwall area. That, of course, takes time, and his custody clock will not start until he actually arrives at that police station in Devon and Cornwall. So people shouldn't expect lots and lots more information at this point. I don't know what time they will have started moving him down into Devon and Cornwall. I don't know what time he's arrived there, but this all adds to the time frame. What I think should be occurring is I believe that the Devon and Cornwall police should be communicating much more readily and much more openly with the public and with the media. Of course, they cannot give away intelligence. They cannot give away their evidence because they are governed by the judicial rules, and they will be working with the Crown and the Crown Prosecution Service to make sure that there is hopefully a successful prosecution. But we really do need to make sure that they should be speaking to, it shouldn't be me, a former chief constable, telling you this. It should have been themselves doing this.
What sort of other things should they be telling us about? I mean, perhaps if they find out that the suspect was known to Ann Widdecombe, is that the sort of thing they might want to put into the public domain?
Not really. Those are the types of things that are very much part of an evidential chain. It is important that they reassure the communities around where the murder occurred. They're doing that by putting in high visibility policing to reassure the communities. But until there's a charge, they shouldn't be really saying too much about their evidence and intelligence trails, but they should be keeping you as informed as they can at this stage.
My understanding is it 4 days a murder suspect can be detained before having to be released?
Well, you have 36 hours from when they arrive at the Devon and Cornwall police station. They would then have a maximum of 36 hours to detain an individual in that police station under a superintendent's authorisation. After 36 hours, they then have to go to a magistrate's court who will look at the evidence. They will make sure that the investigation is being carried out as expeditiously as possible, and they then can authorise up to 96 hours detention without charge.
Sue, thank you ever so much for clarifying those details of the process and keeping us up to speed in what we can expect to hear and why we're not going to be hearing everything as soon as we may want to know. I think that's very important that the public are kept informed, really, as to why they're not being informed. And at the end of the day, she is a high-profile figure. I'm desperate to know what's gone on here. But also there is a sense it's not automatically my right or my business. The police have to do their job. The family and friends are the first concern before our sort of morbid curiosity should be something that is pandered to.
Yeah, of course. And also with Anne, particularly with you, I've worked with Anne, but was not as close with Anne as you were. It's different. You want justice, and as frustrating as it is, because huge, great voids get created, these black holes get created, because all we want to know is how, why, when, what went on, why can't you tell us? And of course, the only way you can secure a prosecution is to not tell us, and probably point us in another direction, just so we're over here keeping ourselves occupied. I get more frustrated by when the police say something, how particular media outlets frame it in the way they want it to be framed. It's so easy to tell which way they want it to go.
That's what I was saying, looking at, because I listened intently, you were here listening to the press conference, nothing to suggest right now it's politically motivated. But then you also have to say, look, again, we shouldn't speculate, but for me, the sort of dividing line is, was the assailant known to Anne or not? Yeah. That makes it personal. If the assailant wasn't known to Anne, then that to me is impersonal and therefore political. But their read of political might be entirely different. Their read of political might be, well, you know, they didn't know her, but it wasn't because she was a former Tory. We don't know. But it does, I can already feel this tension among, like you said, people who kind of want it to go one way, people who want it to go the other. And there's something quite dark about that. Understandable, but there is something quite dark about that, because what we do is we forget that at the end of the day someone has been brutally murdered. And it concerns me. I don't hope for anything in this. I just hope whoever did this is brought to justice. But I do think the media needs to take a long, hard look at itself, because all too often we have seen repeatedly a particular spin put on, whether it's a story related to a horrible, heinous crime such as this, or something else. They are the ones who decide what it is and what the takeaway line is, particularly what I'd like to call the legacy media, you know, the BBC, Sky. They like to think that they will call the shots and frame it exactly as they wish it to be framed. And sometimes I think that, like I said, saying this is not political is partial, because the police didn't say it wasn't. They said at present there is no evidence for. Now, it may turn out to not be at all. And then fine, that headline that's already been run on Sky isn't a problem. If it turns out that actually the police do uncover some evidence that there were, you know, reasons for this horrible murder that has nothing to do with a personal relationship with Anne, I'm afraid that headline's been as deliberately disinformed or misinformed, trying to, you know, Will Geddes my language here. We've got to be so careful with the words that we use and the way we convey information to the public. Yeah, and these people aren't stupid. They use enough plausible deniability so that if challenged, they can say, well, all we're doing, we've got a strap line, we've got a ticker, we're going to use a certain amount of words, etc. Look, let's just take a step back for a moment, if we can, from the Ann Widdecombe murder. On Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, prior to us knowing this, the biggest story wasn't this. The biggest story was Nigel Farage and this surprise by-election, which he called. Now, let's not make any bones about it.
the legacy media were revelling in that. The idea that this could be the moment that the anti-hero, the guy that they really dislike, could be brought down, could be foisted by his own petard because he's called a by-election in which he can lose to Count Binface. Count Binface, who was on Newsnight, which once a serious political discourse programme every evening, which you and I would have tuned into 20 years ago to try and get the cut and thrust of politics. We wouldn't do anymore. It's become like a podcast.
I wouldn't say that. They invite me on from time to time.
And when they do, you're often vilified, aren't you? Look, here's somebody you can have a go at, by the way. She's going to say things you don't agree with. It's Alex Phillips, you know her. She's the one who rants on radio. She gets it wrong all the time. What do you have to say to her? They frame it in a certain way. So what this is at the moment is, I think, a certain amount of fear, and I've seen it some pretty high-profile political commentators, which I won't name now, that if you look at their Twitter accounts, are going mad about the fact that people are forgetting what happened with Nigel, and if this is politically motivated in some way, it might even justify that Nigel needs security. God forbid that Nigel Farage needs security. And you know, Ann Widdecombe's been part of, been a household name for many decades, right from the 70s all the way up to obviously on Friday. Nigel Farage has only been around about half of that time. However, he is breaking down the establishment. He is creating so many waves that people want him gone. So what you could, and I don't mean physically, but they want him gone for the political landscape.
Some actually probably do want him
Well,
gone
they probably
physically,
do. I'm just trying not to make that accusation. But what's clear is they are quite worried that this will distract enough, and even worse for them, give credence and validate what Nigel Farage is saying. It is this sense that
they're not able to control the narrative. They want the narrative to be Nigel Farage is a crook who took £5 million and didn't declare it. Nigel Farage says, look, it was before I became an MP, it was for personal security, which I need. You know, and everyone out there realises this is a peak-on moment where what has happened to Anne can move that debate. It can move that debate. It will move that debate in terms of if we find out it's not politically motivated, just wait for them to start popping the champagne corks, open season once again. If we find out it is, they're going to have to scramble. And this is what is quite sick, actually, in the editorial mindset of certain newsrooms, because they're willing a certain outcome. But like I said, it might be quite sick in this, you know, mindset of newsrooms more affiliated to me. But anyway, for me, it's just holding a massive dystopian mirror up at society.
Of course.
Let's take a call, because we've got Rita in Worcestershire on the line. Good afternoon, Rita.
Good afternoon, Alex.
How are you, my darling?
I'm fine, I just wanted to speak about the constituency people, staff that work there.
For politicians.
I worked in a constituency office during the expenses saga. I used to, rightly or wrongly, I used to get telephone calls from people saying that they were going to attack the MP, they were going to attack her family, and also they were going to attack me. Wow. I had people come into the office who would verbally abuse me and physically abuse me. So then we had to have a security buzzer put on the door. But every time that security buzzer goes, you look and you think, what's going to happen? It's a nightmare.
The expenses scandal is going back to 2009. I mean, this is, it shows that we have had this horrible rot in our politics for a long time. It's striking, isn't it, when you get on the tube, you'll have messages of be nice to one another. When you go to your doctor's surgery, it'll say, please don't attack the receptionist. When you go to the bank, it'll say, intolerance towards our staff will not be tolerated. You phone up a phone line about your insurance company, and they know you're going to be waiting for 40 minutes, and it says, anger and vitriol directed at our staff will not be tolerated. Isn't it sad? Isn't it sad that where once upon a time when I was growing up, we didn't need to keep being reminded to not be abusive?
Well, it is sad because the people that work in these offices are there to help. We are there to help the public. We are there to help the community. We're there. We take messages and we pass them on. I was a district councillor also at the time, and I would take some of the issues on board because they were local. And when you help them, that's fine. But when you don't help them, you get so much abuse. It's unbelievable. But at the end of the day, I'm just saying that it isn't just the constituency MP, it's also the staff that need to be safeguarded, that need to be looked after. They probably are now more than ever, but at my time they weren't. So I just wanted to say that it's not just the MPs or high-profile people, it's people who work in local government.
Yeah, very interesting insight. Thank you so much for calling us, Rita. I mean, this is it. It's... We live in such a mad world now where, you know, this is mad, this horrible, sick thing where people phone an ambulance to lob projectiles at it. You know, we're seeing a breakdown of society where a football team gets, you know, beaten in the World Cup and the foreign nationals who are supporting that football team are rioting on our streets. And I think, well, I wouldn't go over to Marrakesh and start tearing up the souks if England don't get into the, you know...
No.
Final of the World Cup. I'd be mad. I'd be, you know.
That would suggest that there are cultural differences between us and them, which is something we've been told we can't say. That would suggest that maybe one culture is better suited to Western life than another. And I think we should continue to have those conversations. Absolutely, we should. It's interesting, isn't it? Rita there, lovely Rita. She's talking just of her own experience, and I'd love to see the correlation between the increase in how entitled people believe they are versus maybe even social media, because social media has given us all a platform in which we can say our piece. I've seen people...
I mean, we're the celebrities in our own little lives, on our own little timelines. We're an authority to the world.
I've seen people who, because they've got a following, think that whatever they're doing in life, whatever they're complaining about, they can say, if you don't listen to me, I'm going to put this on X, and everybody's going to listen to me because I have a huge following on X, etc. It doesn't matter how big you're following on X. It's not... None of this stuff's important, right? It's all... Whenever you're talking with a human being, how much they've got on your nerves or how much they're representing the organisation that has got on your nerves, you have to treat them with decency. Ann Widdecombe treated everybody with decency. So we seem to have lost, and the reason I'm saying this is I think this is closely linked to British culture that has been entirely lost. And we cannot... for whatever reason, get back there at the moment. Now, to be British would be to be decent, would be to, you know, face adversity...
Stiff upper lip, polite to a fault. Probably, I always say that the UK is one of the most inherently rules-based cultures I've ever met. You know, you just cross the channel and people don't know how to queue anymore. I remember when I was living in Africa and in Ghana, and you used to have to get on these mini buses, which like the buses, the tro-tro. And as soon as the thing pulls up, everyone's bashing each other out the way. Brits hold open doors. We're very conscientious about, if you sit by a stranger on public transport, keeping some physical distance. You don't want to strike up a conversation unless there's been a body language cue that person is saying, look, if you speak to me, I will probably speak back. And there's a fantastic book called Watching the English, which lays this out. And there are things that we do that other cultures don't. And our best litmus test when it comes to our socialisation and our consideration for other people is the weather conversation. When you see someone for the first time, or in a lift with them, or on the train, a lot of people, you know, might do a social cue by looking out the window or reading a book or having earphones in, which is saying, please don't disturb me. I'm not in the mood to talk right now. Other people sitting there might sort of, you know, smile and look away. When you want to test the waters, it's always weather. Isn't it hot?
Yeah.
And then the person will go, yeah, it is a bit. And then you think, not a conversation. OK, great. We'll be like, oh, isn't it just? I wish I had one of those little fans on me and the air conditioning's gone to pot. I was standing at that bus stop for 10 minutes. I thought I was in the Sahara Desert. And there you go. You're forging communication. But when it comes to reading social cues and having a sort of rules-based system that is inherently built within us, we haven't sat down and had lessons about this in school, but it's the way we've lived for hundreds of years, which is just understood by a certain age. We have always been probably one of the most polite, etiquette-ridden, self-disciplined and considerate nations on earth. And I think what has happened is we have allowed not just people from other cultures to come and start diluting that or challenging that, but what has taken place, the representations online, where all of a sudden those body language cues, that sort of immediacy of how you're making someone think and feel in the present moment is completely stripped away. And it's chipping away at our core values.
We've given up our principles. We've given up our principles to accommodate people, but accommodate people that have no wish to assimilate with those principles. And we say it wasn't taught in schools, but we used to reward people based on their behaviour. Now everybody's rewarded irrespective of their behaviour. If you demand equality without any standard being met, then of course you're just going to be able to do whatever you want. You know, if I behave like an absolute lunatic in here and just start swearing and talking inappropriately about things, I should not be able to work as a broadcaster from here on in, because there has to be a certain level of decency. If then there's a whole cohort of people who say, well, Paul should be able to do what he likes, that's what we're here for, then I think that's wrong. I think that we should act with decency and decorum. And that word decorum, I mean, it feels like a word that's ancient now. Decorum is something, it just drives me mad. My dad used to mention decorum all the time. You must have decorum, you must have decorum. Where's your decorum? And it basically, what he was saying to me is, irrespective of what's happening to you, you need to be able to represent yourself in a way that represents the family, or represents you best, or represents the organisation
best. School,
best.
we're always told when you're in your school uniform, you're representing the school, even when you leave these school gates. But, like I said, there's also, you made a very good point there, we've got to go to breaks, and you made a very good point, which is that there are people who have behaved without decorum. I'm thinking of various people, especially on the left wing and the media cycles, who, still get to present their shows because they're on a certain side of politics, and they get away with abhorrent behaviour, and they don't face justice. There's no consequences, and that's you need consequence. That's something Kemi Badenoch said, and she was right about that. When you get rid of consequence, what have you got left to stand on? Right, we're going to be taking a short break, and I'm going to read a lot of your messages, and I really would like to speak to some of you today. Sharing is caring. We all need a bit of moral support, and we need to continue edifying and building our family of decent, decorum-driven, respectful, intelligent patriots. So if you think that sounds like you, how about give me a call, 03444 99 1000. It's your normal network rate. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp, 87222 on the text. If you're going to text me, write the word talk before your message. We're back after this.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, let's do some of your messages. Leslie in Hartley says, Dear Anne simply lived her life according to her strong faith. She was an example to us all. Alex, it's all right for Will Geddes to talk about secure yourself, but I've had at least 3 data breaches, and one of them was from my employer, the government. So all well and good for digital ID, eh? I know, that's the other thing. That does have a very dystopian tinge to it. Says, Alex, Paul Cox is so right. I'm crying as I write this. I'm a total supporter of you and what you bravely do for women and this country, but I'm too afraid to even say so, even in my own home. I'm devastated about Anne, and I'm scared for you, myself, my young adult children, and all who disagree with the awful left ideology. Please, please keep fighting with love, Tracy, in Warwickshire. Gosh, imagine being scared to tell someone that you like me.
Well, it's very true. I was talking to Peter Blixey yesterday, and a young police officer had reached out to me in my DMs on Facebook and said they wanted to make a comment on my post, but he couldn't because he feared the sack. I work for... Look, I mean, this, I probably shouldn't... I very rarely talk about me personally, but let me just tell you something. When I worked for Transport for London, towards the end of my career there, they knew exactly what my other career was, and they were openly tracking my whereabouts. So, because their philosophy was to completely disagree with the things that I was saying and doing, of course. And under guises of all sorts of other things, I was presented with, you were here on this day and you said you were going to be here on that day, and we saw you travel there on the tube and what you were doing there last night. And
that's really gross.
And it's, well, obviously, not long after that, I left. But people will use everything that's available them to track you if they don't like what you are doing.
That is something that the left do a lot. They're very authoritarian. They do this sort of archaeological offence as well. They will go back through everything you've ever said to look for something. Now, I don't see how you can be offended by something you've actively hoped and wished was there to find. Do you know what I mean? That's mad.
Yeah.
That's like, if I hadn't just said it to your face 2 seconds ago, deliberately to peeve you, then you have no right to be offended. To actively dig around looking for something that you go, you've really hurt me because, or you disgust me because 3 years ago you typed this. It's like, what the F is wrong with you?
Well, they also forget that not everybody's on their side. So unbeknownst to the people I worked for and the director that they worked for, there were people who sat above them that knew me for what I did elsewhere and were saying to me, Paul, your time is coming to an end because they don't like you. And as a result, I was fully prepared for what was coming. And that's just by me having an independent career. I was only working part-time at the end of my career for TfL, but having an independent career outside of TfL, but not just having the audacity to do that, not just being a stand-up comedian, but also being a political commentator as well, someone who spoke. And I never did this on air all the time I worked for TfL, but someone who spoke against someone like Sadiq Khan, someone who spoke against the Labour Party. And these firms are entirely indoctrinated. You know, they would have looked at me as someone who was a bad doer, you know, somebody who's doing wrong, as stepping out of line and having wrong think. You know, someone caught, I'll never forget once, someone caught me reading the Daily Mail at TfL and looked at me as if to say, that is disgusting. You know, like I'd been accessing something really inappropriate at work. All I was doing was reading the Daily Mail.
Ideology, my God.
It's just the Daily Mail.
What's happening? Dear Alex, you have a massive following. Stay strong, says James in Devon. Thanks. It's kind of the following that... I mean, I think most of the following is good.
You do have a massive following, Alex.
But it does... Well, it doesn't matter what I do or don't. It's not always a great thing, if I'm honest with you.
But it is an endorsement, by the way. You do put yourself out there, and it's very easy for me to sit here and say that, and for you to feel uncomfortable about that, because it's really not what you're about.
Of course, that's making me uncomfortable.
I know you very well. It's not what you're about at all. And the reason I mentioned it earlier is because there will be lots of people out there who could leave messages and not even use their real name to say that they watch this channel.
There's a lot of people who seem to have theories on me and say things about me, and they couldn't be further from the truth. They could not be further from the truth. You know, anyone who's wondering, I'm just a very quiet, peaceful person who likes to cook. I love cooking. I like cryptic crosswords. I love Formula One. That's one of my major passions. I love being in the countryside. I love my family. I'm extremely close to my brother, my mum, my dad, my brother's wife. I've got a very strong network of friends, and I'm quite boring and moralistic. The idea that I'm running around the world having sordid affairs, I wish. Unfortunately, that is not my life. If you're looking for the sort of steamy pages of Mills and Boon in the Book of Alex, you are not going to find it, I'm afraid. Especially the idea that I'd be having, you know, interactions with married men as a Christian woman. I know I speak out and I've got a mouth on me. I like to swear. I'm a bit naughty, and, you know, about 24 hours can't pass until I need my next, you know, pint. But I really do. I'm sort of annoyingly pious on some level. I kind of sometimes I feel I restrict myself too much, that I should allow myself to go and be, you know, have more normal fun, when I'm like, shouldn't do that. So yeah, it's the idea that I'm some sort of lascivious loose woman who hates people. The idea that I could be a racist, for crying out loud. I've lived in Ghana, India, Kenya. I've had you know, relationships with men of all hues, and you know, that's the most frustrating thing, when people tell you what you are, when they tell you where you have worked and who you have slept with and what you think and what you do. You know, but people keep saying online that I'm high on cocaine. I would never, ever categorically touch that stuff. Forget it. I'm not bloody getting in. Sorry, I've come. Not getting... No! I talk enough as it is. I've got a hyperactive mind and I find it hard to sleep at night. I don't even drink coffee. I think I'm going to get involved with, like, some sort of weird powders. But that's the most frustrating thing, when you are a passenger and watching other people talking about you and your life and what you think and feel and your lifestyle, and you just think, this isn't me. This isn't remotely me, and people buy into it and jump on the bandwagon and then start throwing it at you. And when you say no, they're like, yes, yes, it is. I'm like, you're not me. You don't know. How dare you tell me who I am? Ugh. Right, let's get on to some calls. Let's speak to Karen in Bournemouth. Good afternoon, Karen.
Hi, Alex. Hi, Paul.
Hi.
Hello.
Now, there's a couple of things I want to say. Firstly, sorry for your loss. I did not know Ann Widdecombe. I saw the odd speech that she made and thought, bloody hell. Also, you know, saw her briefly on Strictly Come Dancing. But what you need to do, because we have an identity crisis in this country, and you can say all those things about Anne, the kindness, the generosity, the sense of humour, and all those things that are really British. And if you say those things, rather than worry about what the idiots are saying on the bad stuff on Blue Sky and all of that, then you are fulfilling a legacy and teaching us what to be British is.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, this is it. But maybe we should start thinking about not constantly shining the spotlight on all the horrible things people say, and the horrible way that they behave, but instead try and flood the zone with positivity and goodness.
The other thing is, I think you're slightly falling into the trap by saying, you know, oh, Labour and the mainstream parties aren't participating in this by-election. Well, they are, because Labour are using Binface as a front man. He's obviously working for Labour because they're paying for it.
Well, the establishments have definitely piled in behind Binface. It's, you know, Binface is the establishment versus Farage. Like I said, I think they need a sort of a slogan now saying reform will take out the trash. I think that's great.
It writes itself, doesn't it?
It writes itself. I must admit, I did message that to me old muck and Nigel. I said, have you thought about that? Not on reform's books, but I have known the man for 20 years, and every now and then you think of something funny. But Karen, no, thank you. It's a really important point that actually we allow ourselves to be sort of like centrifugally drawn into their evil and their horribleness by talking about it. So, do you remember when we used to do Weird Hour? And it was just, Weird Hour was great because it was just an hour of fun. We wanted to put joy back into the system. We wanted to just inject absurdity and friendship and laughter and humour and camaraderie and light-hearted relief back into things. And then we weren't doing late nights anymore, and it was like, can we be that weird on a Sunday afternoon?
Turns out probably not. And obviously, if we
not like now.
If we were doing it now, it would be inappropriate. But you know, that's not to say that Weird Hour doesn't make a resurgence back in the future, because I think people loved it for the fact that we were irreverent, and we just talked about tinned meats and maybe what type of shoes we wore in 1990.
People were watching one of the greatest friendships being built in real time, live on air.
Well, it certainly happened the minute you said the lights have gone out in London, and I pointed out that the blind was down. From that point on, I thought, this is my woman, and the audience... Claire from Wales thought, this is what I'm going to watch.
Do you know, I remember when we were first on air together, my ex messaged me and asked if there was something going on between us.
We hadn't even met at that point. The chemistry was like that. Your poor ex.
Just like that. Yeah. So that's going to be the next rumour going around.
Yeah, obviously that's going on.
You'll be on the list of all the people that Alex is apparently having a relationship with. Karen, thank you so much. Let's speak to Grace. Hi, Grace.
Hi. Well, I'm weird, so there we go. I'll be your stand-in for Weird Al, because I'm weird, but not in an interesting way. I'll say just briefly as a side, since you mentioned several countries in the Global South, I feel really strongly that though those countries are hugely varied, as you will know, there are some communities within those countries in the Global South where people are really severely impoverished. And if people wanted to be kind and be social justice warriors, they would actually put their energy into calling for support for those human beings rather than trying to convince everyone else of a redefinition of what a woman is, for example. And I just needed to say that because it really gets on my nerves.
I think it's really interesting. I was saying to someone the other day, there was a report that had come out, and it was about accessibility, disability, things like that. It was a report into PIP payments, that's it. And PIP payments were designed to help people living with a disability to be able to work, because things they might need to afford in order for them to be able to go about their daily lives and do their jobs. And I was on Politics Live, and as I was walking out the studios, and they said, what has horrified me so much is we live in a capital city that if you happen to be in a wheelchair, there's very little provision made for you. Getting around on the tube is almost a nightmare. It's only the Jubilee line, really, that enables you. You never see someone in a wheelchair on the tube. Ask yourself why, right? Because it's incredibly difficult if you have physical handicaps to be able to function in society today. And we've sort of thrown those people to one side because we've turned sexuality into a handicap or skin colour into a handicap. They're not. And actually what makes them a handicap is when people tell you they are and force you to believe that they are. Because, if anything, actually, a lot of people are able to use these sorts of identity labels as an advantage, use it as a platform, a springboard to get opportunities that other people may not. And I think there's something really quite grotesque about the fact that people who really are in need, people who are facing actual famine, people who are, you know, victims of rapes and murders, people who genuinely live in poverty and can't afford to heat their homes or buy food, or people who have been born with physical defects or suffered horrible accidents or are veterans with PTSD, you know, people with real problems. We're increasingly neglecting to look after them because we're beatifying these fake conditions such as prejudice or unconscious bias. You can't, that to me is an oxymoron. If it's not conscious, how can it be bias? Do you know what I mean? You can't think something in a skewed way without thinking it. It's a madness.
I think that we're seeing a real change in our society, and it's not just because of people coming in from other places with different cultures. I mean, earlier on, Philip Kisley referenced the Old Testament, and in the Old Testament time era, there was a lot of barbarity, and sometimes people pull out random verses and they say, oh, look, God is horrible. No, that was a really barbaric time, but we're privileged now, as you have said, to live in a culture that's been influenced by the teachings of Jesus to the extent that we're so used to it, we don't even realise it.
Yeah.
But actually, a lot of people in this country grew up with the idea that a good thing to do is to aim to love your enemies. Mm-hmm. And that comes from Jesus' teachings. But even a lot of people who didn't choose to follow him would have had that in their kind of environment in their formative years. And one of the reasons I think we're seeing so much vitriol now on different sides of the political spectrum, depending on what the topic is and where you look, I think we're seeing a lot more vitriol because we're losing that. And those foundational teachings, which aren't just British, we're fortunate to have them in Britain, but they're not kind of genetically connected to us. It's not about us being...
But they are born out of Christendom, the New Covenant and the Great Revelation that happened 2,026 years ago. That's why we've got the dates that we have, which changed the game from brutal, ancient world to a modern society with far less war and far more kindness. Grace. By name, by nature. We always love speaking to you. Thank you ever so much. OK, going to take a short break. Barely talked about. I've got all this here. I've got a pack of news stories that I haven't covered, and I've just been doodling hearts like a little schoolgirl. I don't know why, just talking there like doodling hearts, being kind. Anyway, we might cover some of those when we come back. That's after this.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We thought, as we've not really done much news today, there have been things knocking about in the papers that we've pulled out that we want to inform you about. So let us rattle through some news you may have missed. This is a very ghoulish story. I talked about this a couple of days ago. This is about an operation that has spanned an international network of dozens of countries, a ring of men involved in drugging and raping women by their partners. And this has included 5 of Britain's biggest police forces, arrests across the country with raids in London, Greater Manchester, West Yorkshire, Kent and Devon and Cornwall. 10 men have been arrested for offences including rape, sexual assault, possession of extreme pornography. Suspects are believed to have been operating in private chat rooms on the encrypted messaging app Telegram. The investigation came in the wake of Gisèle Pellicot, a 72-year-old French woman who waived her anonymity in what became France's largest rape trial. Now, what is so frightening about this, Paul? We've been talking about this hypersexualisation, pornography, this sort of the evil effects of the internet, is internationally men are colluding to give each other tips and advice how to buy drugs, how to drug women, including their own partners, inviting people to rape it, film it, sharing the footage. This isn't a big international...
Yeah, so depraved as well. So utterly depraved. That no type of rape is good, but the fact that people are raping their own...
That was the wildest line I've
just cut it there. but the fact that they are raping their own wives and partners, to me, is another level of demonic behaviour. Not that that's why I wanted to caveat it the way I did, but it's evil. I don't know how else to describe it. But it's utterly evil.
It shows what goes on online. I mean, thankfully, with consequences. But Paul and I were talking earlier about we really need to talk about the hypersexualisation of society, and especially it's something I've campaigned against for a long time: user-generated pornography. In the same way that I can't make bootleg moonshine and flog it out my blimmin' garage door, the idea that people can log on to a website where any old person has put up a really extreme video, you don't know the consent, you don't know the people participating, you don't know if they're trafficked, you don't know if they're vulnerable, the content's going to rewire your brain and make you get incredibly depressed. It completely changes your dopamine system. It is so dangerous. And no government has talked about this in the UK. We just talk about protecting kids. We really need to start talking about pornography. I've said that for a very, very long time, especially not just for the protection of women, but the sanity of men. Right, Andy Burnham will scrap Lammy's plans to curb jury trials. Well, that's good. Lammy wanted to get rid of jury trials. Apparently Burnham is going to ditch that.
Yeah, don't read too much into this, because he will, because it was the most mental thing anyone thought could happen. You know, jury trials, which has happened since the Doomsday, and David Lammy, of all people, I mean, how this go... One thing I will say about David Lammy, if you've got a problem child out there that you think isn't really going to amount to much, have a look at David Lammy. He is an absolute wally who's got to the very top of British society. So, you know, all is not lost. So this, for me, is just a little bit of red meat for Andy Burnham to say, look, you know, I'm a much more sensible guy, this is what I'm going to do. You wait till the other nonsense that's going to come through as a result. This isn't going to make way for something sensible. He's not going to say, and we're going to slash the welfare budget by 10%, and we're going to reduce PIPs, and you can't have a car if you've got ADHD. None of that's coming our way. So this is low-hanging fruit. Jury trials was an absolute ridiculous policy, even if it did save 20 minutes whilst you know, in the process of trying to get people to trial. And we must remember there are victims on all sides of this. People are innocent and are waiting for trials, people are victims that are waiting for trials. This is just a little bit of red meat so that he can pass through any other nonsense that he's got coming his way, because it's not a different leader, it's just a different haircut.
Now, apparently, talking about that, officials from Foreign Offices have been speaking to associates in the Mauritian cabinet, and they've been told that when Andy Burnham comes in, the Chagos deal is still going to go ahead.
There you go.
I mean,
straight away.
Yeah.
First thing that comes across is, and the Chagos deal is a complete surrender deal. It's treason. There's absolutely no way we should be doing it. There's no reason to do it. You know, the same government that would change laws in order to make themselves legitimate and do the things they want to do are worried about, you know, the law of the legitimacy of owning the Chagos Islands. Just keep
What
hold
is
of
so
it.
mad about this, ladies and gentlemen, if we want to do a little bit of contextual contrast, is they're having a hissy fit because Nigel Farage personally got $5 million for security. Apparently the only offence is he didn't tell anyone this.
There's
That's
no crime.
it.
There's no
Well,
crime.
he hasn't done a crime, he just didn't tell anyone this. That is what this boils down to according to the rules. Nothing said that he couldn't have money as a private citizen for his own personal security. He just didn't say, and it's a time frame, but they're turning it into, well, isn't he a monster? Meanwhile, Chagos, there are people working at law firms, which may be the same law firms as people with elected positions in this government, who are set to make an absolute stinking killing. We're not just talking about 5 million, millions connected to essentially handing over the Chagos Islands and paying Mauritius to do so. And the plan was Mauritius would then become a tax-free island and various people might have become Mauritian citizens in order to benefit. Ask yourself, which is worse? Whether there are people sitting in the cabinet of this country who know people who are going to cash in bigger than a lottery win by giving British territory to a state allied with a nation frankly hostile to our own. Which is worse? That as a potential conflict of interest, or not saying to authorities that someone a year ago had given you money for your personal protection? Ask yourself.
Exactly.
Now, Gary Lineker.
Here we go.
I've spoken about him for a while. Surprisingly, you'd think in the World Cup he'd be bobbing up with his big ears everywhere with, you know, stuff to say. Well, he has. He's got his Rest of Football podcast, and apparently he's been calling the Falkland Islands Las Malvinas. What a nasty little provocative thing to do.
Yeah, because
British territory. People died. People died defending that. The islanders have voted repeatedly, 98% in a referendum, to say they are British and they want to be British. And this man thinks he's being funny and clever and oh so middle class and superior and posturing by completely trammeling the memories of people who were killed in that conflict, who suffered dismemberment, life-changing burns, because he wants to seem what? Sophisticated?
Well, I also suspect that he doesn't care for British, English or otherwise nationalism or patriotism in any way. He will see those words as evil, and he will support anything against it. We've always had these characters within our own society that see everything that we stand for as bad and everything else that everybody else stands for as good. Gary Lineker is just one example of that. He doesn't just work on The Rest Is Football. He owns the production company that does The Rest Is Football, The Rest Is Politics. Yeah, The Rest Is History.
This is what saddens me about our independent media space in the United Kingdom, which is you look over at America where they've got Real America's Voice, they've got the Daily Wire, they've got Sirius FM, whatever it's called, you know, XM, that's it, thank you, Chris. Here, it's all blimmin' owned by global media, the BBC or Gary Lineker. It's not that independent.
He's just trying constantly to appeal to an audience that probably doesn't exist. In this case, it's an audience of Argentinians who want the Falkland Islands back, and what he's trying to do is go, yes, I'm not going to come down on one side. What they fail to understand is everything that you said, that these aren't... This isn't a peaceful mission. The Falklands War might have been in 1982. It's not that long ago. Plenty of people lost their parents. You know, I've got friends my age. In the early 80s, I was a very small child, and I got guys that I went to school with in the Portsmouth area that lost their parents in the Falklands War. They'd signed up to fight for England, Queen and country, and they did so, and they lost their lives as a result. Because it was British territory and still is British territory, and that is how it shall remain. Why would he want to appease the enemy? The idea on the left is there is no enemy, or actually the enemy is our friend and we are the enemy.
Do you know what? I think if someone reminded Gary Lineker that he'd be appeasing Javier Milei, who is as bad as right-wing as they come, he might suddenly start saying Falkland Islands again.
Yeah. Good point.
But, you know, it's just it's unnecessary posturing, quite frankly.
Yeah,
it's sort of, you know, wading into matters geopolitical, stick to the football would be my advice. Paul, thank you so much for joining me today. Just want to give everybody a reminder of some of the biggest news going on today, which we did have an update into the murder of Ann Widdecombe. Detectives investigating the murder of the former MP and MEP say there is nothing to suggest it was politically motivated at present. They added they are not looking for anyone else in connection with her death, having arrested a 28-year-old man from Rotherham. He has been held in custody after cooperating with South Yorkshire Police and Counter-Terror Police. We understand he will now have to be conveyed down to a police station within the Devon and Cornwall constituency, where he will undergo police interview.